The restaurant was one of those places with an aggressively minimalist, high-design interior. So, of course, they served Korean barbecue. Leo had a laugh. He remembered the two letters on the sign outside, K and R. The higher the price, the simpler the concept. The main difference between this place and the all-you-can-eat joints on the student strip was that the servers cooked the meat for you. And here, the servers were better-looking, bowed lower, and had relentlessly cheerful attitudes that were reflected in the mandatory 20% service charge. All that was missing was them calling him sir and Stella ma'am. And the meat was expensive, truly expensive. The first piece the server grilled, a perfectly marbled slice of short rib, was so sublime that Leo felt a wave of pure, unadulterated satisfaction wash over him. Stella seemed just as happy, digging in without a second thought. Leo insisted the meal was on him. He'd had a recent influx of cash for various rewards and stipends. The first bite was so good he immediately flagged down the server for a menu to order another round. When he saw the price, $1.98 for two small, jewel-like pieces of beef, he thought, well, it better be good. For this price, it has a moral obligation to be life-changing. The final bill for the two of them came to $298, plus a $60 service charge, totaling over $350. Leo paid without flinching. Thank God for the system, or he'd never be able to afford dating Stella. Not that she would have cared. Stella wasn't the type to deny herself something she wanted. She felt like barbecue, so they came. If Leo hadn't insisted on treating her, she would have happily paid. She wasn't going to eat something she didn't want just to accommodate his budget. In that respect, they were perfectly in sync. Leo didn't force things, and neither did she. If it didn't work, it didn't work. They were both seniors, after all. It was a little late in the game to suddenly develop picky eating habits. The fact that they worked so well together was because, deep down, their personalities just clicked. After paying, Leo suggested they go shopping, which had been the original plan. They left the restaurant holding hands. We're still splitting this, Stella said. You got dinner, so I'll get the shopping. My dad just sent me a ton of spending money anyway. Richard Vance had indeed transferred a significant sum to his daughter. He'd never worried about Stella being taken advantage of by some gold digger. He'd always assumed her intelligence and his own reputation would be enough. But seeing the recent influx of ridiculously expensive gifts Leo had given her, he realized his daughter wasn't leveraging her wealth at all. She was actually the one benefiting. Mr. Vance would rather his daughter be the generous one than the one taking advantage of someone else. He'd proudly taken the tea Leo had won and gifted it to Secretary Harrison, boasting that it was from his daughter's boyfriend. It had given him immense face. Leo figured shopping for clothes wouldn't be too outrageous. He just needed a few basic sweaters or long-sleeve tees, nothing fancy. It shouldn't be too expensive. He agreed, deciding he'd just pay for his own things if they got too pricey. He had enough cash on him. Money really was a man's courage. Today, when the doorman in the crisp suit opened the door for them, Leo didn't feel a flicker of intimidation. He met the man's eyes without looking away. This was his first time shopping with a girlfriend, though not his first time shopping with a woman. His mom and his aunt loved to drag him along as their designated bag carrier. He still had a deep-seated fear of those trips, the boundless, terrifying stamina of a woman on a mission. They wouldn't just meticulously inspect every single store. They'd finish the entire mall and then, with photographic memory, recall a few places they liked and start a second lap. Leo steeled himself for the long haul. But Stella wasn't the type to wander into every store. She walked with purpose, leading them straight to a Dior boutique. Leo wasn't a brand expert, but he knew Dior. There was that old joke, get a boy an Audi, a girl a Dior, and a kid an Oreo. And Princess Diana's famous handbag, that was Dior, right? Though now he mostly heard it called a trophy wife bag. Gorgeous, expensive, heavy, and utterly impractical. He hadn't even known the brand made menswear. Stella had the associate lead them directly to the men's section. Her selection process was ruthlessly efficient. His mom would finger the fabric, scrutinize the tailoring, make him try it on, and if it looked good, she'd haggle. If it was still too expensive, she'd reluctantly walk away, vowing to return for the end-of-season sale. Stella just pointed. Based on pure instinct, she'd point at an item she liked, and two sales associates would swoop in to gather it. You've got a great eye, Leo said, remembering how well the clothes she'd bought him before had fit. You're really good at this. She shook her head. Last time, I hired a fit model with your exact height, weight, and build. If it looked good on him, I bought it for you. Then she grinned. No need for that today. How about the real thing right here? Leo was floored. That's a real job? A professional clothes try-runner? The things you learn. He dutifully went into the fitting room. A white tee with a black hoodie, a denim jacket with a shearling collar, a leather collar down coat, button-down shirts, Base layers. While trying them on, he snuck a peek at the price tags. The simple white t-shirt was the cheapest item, a promotional piece. It was only $950, and with a store discount, it would be a steal at $920. At first, it was exciting, but after the 10th outfit, a kind of aesthetic fatigue set in. Stella, however, was in her element. She thought everything looked great on him and seemed ready to buy it all. She had him give the associates his dorm address for delivery. Leo didn't argue or make a scene in front of the staff. But watching Stella swipe her card for what was clearly tens of thousands of dollars worth of clothes was still a shock. He never imagined this would happen to him. The most outlandish wish fulfillment novels he'd ever read had their billionaire CEOs wearing something from the Men's Warehouse to sign a $200 million deal. The denim jacket was $2, $800. The wool coat was $4, $500. And that cheap knit t-shirt, $1, $0.50. It was the only four-figure item in the pile. Everything else was in the five-figure range. For a bill that ran well over 20 grand, it was really only a couple of full outfits. Stella was beaming. She was finally starting to understand why her mother, Victoria, got such a thrill from buying her gifts. There was a profound sense of accomplishment in it, especially when it was for someone you cared about. Eventually, even Leo was exhausted. He'd thought Stella would be different from his mom and aunt, but in the end, the outcome was the same: more shopping. They moved on to other stores. Soon, he was wearing a pair of LV shearling slides, an Hermes beanie, and a Miu jacket. He was a walking billboard for luxury goods. Though thankfully, most of the pieces were understated, the logos hidden. He was so tired that he collapsed in a VIP lounge, while Stella, still buzzing with energy, continued to browse for him. He sat sipping a cup of tea and nibbling on a small cake. As he was finishing, a woman who looked to be in her 50s, with a round face and perfectly coiffed hair, approached him. She handed him a business card. "Young man," she said, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "Whatever she's paying you a month, I'll double it." A blush crept up Leo's neck. The system didn't even register her. She wasn't single. And she was saying that to him? She looked older than his own mother. If he actually agreed to this, would his mom have to call his girlfriend ma'am? The woman's eyes drifted down to his exposed forearms. A look of satisfaction crossed her face. "Ah, youth. All that fire keeps you warm." "Ha ha ha." Leo stared at her, frozen. "Please, just leave me alone." Leo sat in the passenger seat of the Maybach as Stella laughed, her head resting on the steering wheel, her shoulders shaking. He had to pat her back gently, worried she might actually hyperventilate. He couldn't believe it himself. He'd been propositioned by a genuine sugar mama, complete with a business card. To be fair, the woman had probably been attractive when she was younger. She had good features, but time had softened them into a wealthy plumpness. The corners of her eyes were webbed with wrinkles, though her smile lines weren't deep. Her face was powdered a stark white, making it seem even larger, and her neck was short and thick, an effect magnified by her high-collared sweater. Her lips were a little too full, her earlobes large and heavy. He shook his head, trying to banish the image. A chill ran down his spine. He never thought his cold resistance buff would be tested like this. Once Stella had laughed herself out, she finally started the car. Leo felt a little insulted. He thought he projected a decent, wholesome image, clear eyes, confident posture, nothing sleazy about him. So why did that woman immediately peg him as someone who could be bought? Was his new vibe that obvious? Then again, he couldn't deny it. Today, he had been kept. He'd completely underestimated Stella's shopping capacity. He'd seen tabloid articles about celebrities dropping hundreds of thousands of dollars on a single shopping trip in L. And thought it was absurd. That kind of money could buy a house. But watching Stella today, he estimated she'd spent close to $30,000 without breaking a sweat. Her father must be an absolute cash machine to have raised a daughter who spent money like it was air. Maybe that's what the woman saw, Stella's extravagant spending, which marked him as a professional boy toy. Well, a job was a job, and the woman had offered to double his salary right off the bat. Leo had practically fled the lounge, terrified she might actually grab him. As far as he knew, the law wasn't exactly on the side of men who claimed they were forced into something against their will. He made a mental note to get back to his boxing lessons tomorrow. A guy had to know how to protect himself out there. Stella drove back to Clearwater Cove. She hadn't gone on a spree like that in a long time. She used to think her mother was a shopaholic, but today she discovered that the apple didn't fall far from the tree. She'd bought Leo a mountain of clothes, shoes, and accessories. Some he could take back to the dorm, and the rest would stay at the condo, so he'd have things to wear whenever he came over. Leo looked at the trunk and back seat, piled high with designer bags, and felt a wave of pressure. He'd thought being a millionaire would be the pinnacle of success, But if $1 million only covered one shopping trip for Stella, how much money would he ever need to make? But that was his problem, not hers. He decided not to dwell on it. The problem was too big to solve just by thinking. Back at the condo, Leo told Stella to relax while he made dinner. He'd read somewhere, in a fantasy novel, of all places, that while some creatures could bleed for 7 days a month and not die, those 7 days were their period of weakness. It was the perfect time to conquer new territory. He decided to make hand-pulled chili oil noodles. It was simple enough. You just had to get the dough right. He found the kitchen fully stocked with every gadget imaginable, including flour. He set the task in the system and got to work, measuring flour and water into a bowl. When Stella heard his plan, she was stunned. She wouldn't have been surprised if a professional chef could do it, but for her boyfriend to whip up hand-pulled noodles from scratch, that was magical. Leo had changed into a set of black and white striped loungewear that Stella had picked out. The condo's heating had been on, so it was warm and cozy inside. The loungewear was from Louis Vuitton, ridiculously casual for its price tag. If Leo hadn't seen the sales associate pull it from the rack himself, he would have never believed it was a luxury item. He used to wonder who bought such expensive clothes. Now he was even more confused. This set, which was essentially fancy pajamas you could wear outside, felt like something his mom would appraise at maybe $50. The actual price? Nearly $2,000. The sales associate had talked about it like it was a cheap little add-on item. The brand's markup was about 100 times its actual value. But Stella loved it. Seeing him in it, she grinned like a starstruck fan. She came over to roll up his sleeves, squeezing his bicep as she did. Then she burst out laughing again, collapsing onto the sofa. She was probably replaying the older woman's comment in her head. All that fire keeps you warm. Leo focused on his task, kneading the dough, adding a little more water, a little more flour, getting the consistency just right. As he worked his arms, the muscles flexed, a picture of quiet strength. Seeing Stella looking bored and still giggling to herself on the couch, he decided to put her to work. "Come film this for me," he said. "You can get a cinematic shot, even with a phone. Point it straight up from below, and when I sprinkle the flour, it'll look like it's snowing down on the lens. Get the water pouring, the kneading." Stella, intrigued, started experimenting with different angles. It was more fun than she expected. She got completely absorbed in filming, while Leo ignored her and continued working the dough. Suddenly, the system's mechanical voice echoed in his mind. Intra-level boxing progress. 33% complete. He'd set his task for the afternoon as accompany someone shopping, and apparently, the system had approved. It seemed that being a shopping companion was a key component of the trophy husband lifestyle. Host has diligently accompanied his partner, experienced the joy of shopping, and the pleasure of giving a gift, rewarding host with double the monetary value of the gift given. Leo's hands froze mid-knead. What? While they were shopping, he remembered that Stella collected Tiffany keys. He didn't quite get the appeal of collecting $1,000 keys, but then again, he used to collect bottle caps and trading cards as a kid. It was probably the same principle. They'd passed the Tiffany & Co. store, and he'd spotted a new sunflower key, big and brilliant with multicolored diamonds. It screamed shiny to his straightforward male aesthetic. He didn't think it was worth the $7,500 price tag, but Stella had bought him so much that he felt he had to get her something. He couldn't just be a complete freeloader. So he bought it for her, thinking it would make a nice necklace. He'd even discreetly searched for it on AliExpress. The first result was a $48 knockoff from some factory in China that looked identical. And now the system was telling him that because he spent $7,500, it was giving him $15,000 back. In that moment, Leo was filled with a single, profound regret. That key had been far too cheap. Yeah, if he'd gone on a shopping spree like Stella and bought her $100,000 worth of gifts, would the system have given him $200,000 back? But what if it hadn't? He still wasn't that bold. Actually, he wasn't being stingy. It was all about proportion. If his entire net worth was $100, giving someone $5 was a significant gesture. Stella's family probably had so many zeros in their bank account they'd lost count. She could spend $100,000 a day for the rest of her life and not make a dent. So, proportionally, he'd been incredibly generous. It was just that the generosity of the poor rarely gets noticed. He channeled all his complicated feelings into the dough, kneading it until it was incredibly elastic. Then he began pulling it, stretching it wider and thinner until it was nearly translucent. Stella had been prepared to eat just to be polite, but as the sizzling hot oil hit the spices, minced scallions, Sichuan peppercorn powder, salt, and a thick layer of chili flakes, an intoxicating aroma filled the air. He tossed the noodles, and because they were so thin, the savory, spicy sauce clung to every inch. They were chewy, fragrant, and unexpectedly delicious. Stella had tasted the best food the world had to offer, but she knew, with absolute certainty, that this bowl of noodles ranked in her top 3 all-time favorite meals. "Why does this taste so different?" she asked, baffled. "It's so much more fragrant than other noodles." "There's a trick to the dough," Leo explained, a smug little smile playing on his lips. "You weren't paying attention while you were filming. I didn't just add water. I added salt, a pinch of baking soda, and a bit of clear oil. That's why the texture is different." The bowl was a vibrant red, spicy, and aromatic. As Stella ate, her lips turned a glossy, crimson red. After dinner, there was no argument over who would do the dishes. They had a dishwasher for that. Instead, Leo helped Stella put away the spoils of their shopping trip, a perfect way to digest their meal. Normally, a housekeeper would handle such things, but for a young couple, doing it together had a certain charm. As they slowly filled the empty closets, it felt like they were filling in the spaces of life together, playing a domestic nesting game. Neither of them was thinking about the future. For now, they were just enjoying the simple act of turning an empty house into a home. Leo noticed that while the clothes Stella had bought him were from a constellation of luxury brands, they all shared one characteristic. The logos were subtle, almost hidden. She'd avoided the pieces that were covered head to toe in monograms, the ones that screamed their brand to the world. Stella hated anything that looked like a walking advertisement. She also tended to avoid bright colors, opting for softer, muted tones like pale blue and dusty pink. She seemed to particularly like seeing him in pink, saying it made him look sweet and handsome. It was a color that demanded fair skin. On anyone with even a hint of a tan, it could be a disaster. Most of the clothes were basics, pants in black, gray, and white. There was one Dior cashmere coat with a cut so perfect it felt like it added half a point to his attractiveness score. It also cost $14,000. Stella had bought it in khaki, and then, because she loved it so much, she'd asked if it came in black. When the associate said yes, but it would have to be shipped from the New York flagship, she'd paid for it on the spot and had it sent directly to his dorm. So now he owned 2 identical, insanely expensive cashmere coats. She'd also stocked him up on shoes, sneakers, shearling-lined slippers, and leather dress shoes. Thankfully classic ones, not some trendy Chelsea boots. At first, Leo had been nervous, trying everything on, but eventually, a comfortable numbness set in. Maybe it was the flattering lighting in the high-end boutiques, or maybe the clothes really were that good, but he felt undeniably handsome. For a moment, he could almost believe he was one of them, a genuine rich kid. He suddenly understood the so-called gold diggers of the world. It wasn't that they didn't want to be the ones getting showered with gifts. They just never got the chance. When a beautiful, wealthy woman was throwing money at you, it was dangerously easy to get swept up in it. An insidious equation even formed in his mind. She's spending this much money on you. How can that not be love? They finished organizing everything, packing a suitcase for him to take back to campus. Then it was time to head back. One of Stella's roommates was leaving for an internship the next day, and she wanted to be there to say goodbye. Senior year was a slow, drawn-out process of separation. For Leo, it was a practical matter. He and Sean had their driver's permit test early the next morning. They took a cab back to Northwood State. Driving the Maybach on a campus would have been far too conspicuous. Back in his dorm room, Leo dragged the suitcase in and immediately began a ruthless purge of his old wardrobe. He pulled out pilled, stiff sweaters, and anything too brightly colored or childish, filling an entire box for donation. He replaced them with the new clothes, a perfect one-for-one swap. When Alex returned, Leo presented his gifts, cashmere sweaters for each of them, in different colors so they wouldn't get mixed up. "Had a bit of a windfall recently, so I got something for you guys," he said casually. His main motivation had been to get one for Sean, whose sweaters were even stiffer and more worn out than the ones Leo had just thrown away. But he couldn't just give his old clothes to Sean. He had to give him something new. He tried on this sweater himself. It was from a good brand, cost about $300, which felt like an absolute bargain after the day's shopping spree. It was warm, soft, and looked great. His mom would probably even approve of the price. He gave Alex the black one, Jordan got sky blue, Sean got brown, and he kept the cream-colored one for himself. Everyone was pleased. "This can be our official dorm uniform," Leo joked. "We'll wear them for group outings." Alex and Jordan recognized the brand and knew it wasn't cheap. Sean just ran his hand over the impossibly soft fabric, guessing it must have cost at least $100. Later, when Leo was in the bathroom, he quietly asked Jordan about the price. "This brand usually starts around $300, Jordan said, examining the collar. "Yeah, probably about that." The number struck Sean silent. Jordan kept his mouth shut. He'd seen the clothes Leo was hanging in his own closet. Those were the really expensive ones. Leo was doing well for himself. and he was bringing his friends up with him. After his shower, Leo felt a sense of relief, as if a weight had been lifted. He lay in bed, texting Stella. She sent him a selfie of her and her 3 roommates crowded around a cake, their heads pressed together. Stella was, as always, the most striking, the first person your eyes were drawn to. The second was Jessica Monroe. Jessica had her hair in 2 long braids woven with colorful thread, a look that managed to be playful instead of childish. After 4 years together, regardless of how close they'd been, the reality of impending separation was setting in. They all knew it wasn't just for a little while. It was the beginning of the end. The chances of them all being together in the same room again were slim. Stella felt a pang of melancholy. She didn't even know when she was leaving. Would she and Leo have to separate, too? Was she really in love with him, or was this just a way to distract herself from the anxiety of moving abroad? It was like cramming for an exam. You get intensely into a video game or a novel, things that seemed infinitely more appealing under pressure. But once the test was over, the magic faded, and the game or book lost its allure. She was confused. Later that night, Jessica asked her, "When are you leaving? If you go abroad, what's going to happen with Leo?" Jessica knew she probably didn't have a right to ask, but she couldn't help it. Her feelings had morphed from a childish desire to steal what Stella had, to a reluctant admiration, to a painful awareness that he deserved someone better, someone like Stella. Stella just grinned. "If I leave, I'll entrust him to you." Jessica's heart skipped a beat. Then she saw the mischievous glint in Stella's eyes and knew she was being teased. She lunged, tackling Stella onto the bed to tickle her. But Stella was immune to tickling. With a laugh, she effortlessly flipped them over, pinning Jessica and tickling her until she begged for mercy. Leo slept soundly. The colder the weather, the deeper he slept. The dorm windows were shut tight against the chill, trapping the carbon dioxide and knocking everyone out. He woke up to the faint light of dawn. 5:54 a.m. His damn internal clock was annoyingly precise. Even Sean was still asleep. Leo scrolled through his phone, browsing his Facebook feed. He found himself liking fewer and fewer posts these days. His friends who had started internships were posting less, while those still on campus documented every falling leaf. He caught up on a web novel he was following, and just like that, 20 minutes vanished. 6:14 a.m. He got up, washed his face, and went to wake Sean, who was usually an early riser. Of all the days to oversleep, it had to be the day of his permit test. Sean jolted awake, disoriented. He'd been so anxious about the test that he'd woken up at 4 a.m., then forced himself back to sleep, only to dream he was already at the testing center. To wake up and see Leo shaking him was a surreal whiplash. He scrambled out of bed. Leo had already texted Dr. Croft to let her know he was taking the test and would be by for her final massage session later. Hitting a tennis ball for an hour and being laid up for 3 days. Maybe tennis was better suited for 80-year-olds. The truth was Dr. Croft's injury was a result of overexerting herself while painting. The tennis match was just the final straw. It was a blessing in disguise. If she hadn't been forced to rest, she might have done some serious damage. Standing in front of his newly organized closet, Leo grabbed a pre-selected outfit. Cream-colored sweater, black overcoat, scarf. The combinations had been Stella's idea. No wonder rich people spent so much on clothes. They bought entire outfits, not just individual pieces. One shirt for one pair of pants. It was like the tea purists who insisted you could only use one teapot for one type of tea. To drink 100 different teas, you'd need 100 different pots. A brilliant strategy for boosting the economy. The testing center was on a windy hill halfway up a mountain. Sean, wearing his new, soft sweater under his usual dark jacket, felt warm and comfortable. He'd crammed the practice questions late into the night and felt reasonably confident. Professor Hoffman's driver, Walt, had offered to take them, but Leo declined. You could only ask for so many favors before you started looking like a helpless child. Walt, understanding the need for boundaries, simply said to call if they needed anything. A shuttle from the driving school was scheduled to pick them up at the campus gate at 7:10 a.m. Leo and Sean were ready by 6:30. From their beds, Jordan and Alex each stuck out an arm and gave them a weak thumbs up for good luck. The two of them headed to the cafeteria for breakfast. On a test day, it was better to play it safe with food you knew wouldn't cause any trouble. The shuttle was a small, beat-up bus. There were 4 other students inside, 2 guys from sophomore year and 2 junior girls. They all seemed to know each other, chatting about skipping class to practice driving and complaining about their instructor. Leo and Sean sat quietly, not mentioning that they hadn't needed a single driving lesson. Sean, as usual, had his camera. He'd gotten over his initial shyness about filming in public and now carried it with a practiced naturalness. As long as he looked professional enough, no one would make fun of him. He was a seasoned filming fanatic now. He documented Leo ordering breakfast, talking to the cafeteria lady, eating. He snapped photos of the simple scenery on the bus. But something about Leo was different today. In his new clothes, he seemed sharper, more put together, more stylish. Sean couldn't quite find the word for it. Once the bus was full and started moving, Sean put the camera away. He and Leo both closed their eyes, trying to rest. Sean couldn't believe how pathetic his nerves were. He'd lost sleep over a simple permit test. Leo had studied the night before while waiting for Stella to shop, but now the rattling of the bus was making him nauseous. It was true what they said, it's easy to get used to luxury, but hard to go back. After riding in high-end cars, you didn't notice their virtues, the clean interior, the soft seats, the quiet ride. But getting back into a rickety old bus with cigarette butts on the floor, the smell of gasoline, and a drafty window was a rude awakening. The morning traffic made it worse, a constant cycle of lurching and stopping. As they dozed, the 4 students in the back were whispering. They hadn't recognized Leo and Sean at first, but when Sean started filming, one of the girls had a flash of recognition. That was the guy from the famous TikTok account, the Roommate Chronicles. The bus finally lurched to a stop near their destination. As they woke up, Sean thoughtfully handed Leo a disposable mask. With the sudden drop in temperature, a lot of people were getting sick. Leo put it on. He hadn't worn one in a while, but it was true. You could hear a symphony of coughing as you walked down the hallways of the underclassmen dorms. The driver told them to find their driving school's group and wait. It was their first time, so they wandered through the crowd until they found the right banner. A coach handed them name tags and ran through the instructions. The wind on the mountain was fierce, and they were forced to wait outside in the cold. Just as Leo was about to yawn, one of the girls from the bus ran up to him. "Excuse me, can we get a picture with you?" she asked, her voice trembling with a mixture of courage and hope. "We're huge fans. We watch your videos every day." Her friend chimed in. "You're even more handsome in person than on TikTok." Leo felt a strange, thrilling, and deeply awkward sensation. He was glad he was wearing the mask. It hid the goofy grin spreading across his face. He pulled it down and posed for a photo. The 2 guys from the bus scrambled over. "Hey, us too. We want a picture too." Leo felt like one of those monkeys in a tourist park, posing for photos with strangers. He didn't know what to do with his face. A neutral expression looked arrogant, but smiling felt fake. Still, he was so used to being filmed that he naturally found a better angle than the others. The resulting pictures made him look effortlessly photogenic next to their excited, slightly stiff poses. After the impromptu photo shoot, he quickly rejoined Sean and pulled his mask back up. As they lined up to enter the testing hall, he heard the people in front of them whispering. "Did you hear? There's a celebrity here today. Don't talk so loud, look behind you. That's him, right? It has to be. Wow, he's so handsome." Leo, feeling the eyes on him, stood up a little straighter, consciously pulling his shoulders back. Then he heard the next sentence. "Man, male celebrities really are short in real life, huh?" Leo, all 174, 9 centimeters of him, nearly stumbled. "Short? Can't you see? I'm almost 5'9". The test was a breeze. Leo missed 1 question. Sean missed 2. They both passed easily. On the way out, they saw the 4 students from the bus, who had also passed, and were excitedly comparing their results. When they saw Leo and Sean approach, they immediately fell silent, their expressions turning cautious and shy. Leo sighed. He walked over to the driver and told him they wouldn't be taking the shuttle back. The thought of sitting in awkward silence for the entire ride was too much. The price of fame, it seemed, was an expensive cab ride. He pulled out his phone and ordered an Uber Black. A wave of guilt washed over him. An Uber Black? What was he thinking? The normal fare would have been about $15. The Uber Black cost $40. As the car pulled away, Leo did some soul-searching. Was he letting this get to his head? But damn, the luxury sedan was a lot more comfortable than that rattling bus. At least it was warm. He had a plan. Yesterday, while shopping with Stella, he'd noticed an electronics store in the high-end mall, the Galleria, that catered specifically to streamers and content creators. The gear was expensive, but he was now Uber Black Leo, a man of decisive action. He was going to upgrade all of Sean's filming and editing equipment. Their channel's earnings weren't nearly enough to cover it, but the income was steady and had already exceeded their wildest expectations. Before this, they would have been thrilled to land a post-grad job that paid a couple $1,000 a month. Now, Sean was transferring him his share of the profits every few days, and it was adding up to a decent living. Leo would front the money for the gear, and Sean could pay it back slowly from the channel's dedicated equipment fund. Hanging out with Stella had changed his perspective on money. It was like having a billionaire friend. You start to think you're one of them. You don't have their money, but you pick up their spending habits. It was unavoidable. It was why he just ordered an Uber Black. It was all part of a learning process. Humans are social animals, inevitably shaped by those around them. What's the point of college? Most students couldn't tell you. But years later, they'd look back and realize that even if they hadn't paid perfect attention in class, they'd spent 4 years surrounded by people of similar intellect and ability from different backgrounds, their ideas and behaviors colliding and shaping one another. That was the real meaning of college. To take the best 4 years of their lives and let them spend it with each other. To be told about freedom and ideals. To learn about poetry and far-off places. To be taught to love their country and themselves. To be told they were capable of greatness, justice, and progress. Everyone needs those 4 years. Because after that comes the long, slow grind of work, which might last until you die. You might fade into the crowd, or you might shine brilliantly, but for a time, you were a college student with a limitless future. That's why you had to endure the stress and exhaustion of getting in. To experience that world. To leave home and enter a new ivory tower, where your failures teach you, your activities lead you to love, your interactions teach you pain, and your exams give you success. You grow, stumbling, but always moving forward. Everyone in school wants to grow up, but everyone who's grown up wants to go back. As the Uber Black neared the Galleria, Leo had a sudden realization. He'd been seduced by the mall's glamour, but it was a place where a simple lunch cost over $300. There was nothing affordable inside. Even if he wanted to upgrade their equipment, he shouldn't do it there. They needed functionality, not a brand name. Electronics became obsolete in a flash. The gear at the Galleria might be slightly better, but it would be 10 times the price for a marginal improvement. It would put way too much pressure on Sean, and it was arrogant of him to even consider it. He was letting a few whispers from strangers give him a massive ego. He wasn't a celebrity. Celebrities got paid thousands for an appearance. He had to pay for his own damn Uber. He was developing an attitude way too soon. He reflected on his own hypocrisy. He rarely read the comments on their TikToks. In the beginning, he had, and the wave of people calling him ugly had stung. The same people who called him ugly one day were probably the ones calling him handsome the next. He learned to tune it out, to think of his online persona as a separate person. But when the online world bled into the real one, he lost his composure. He was posturing, letting the words and looks of others dictate his actions. He was becoming a puppet. One person calls him short, he stands on his toes. Another calls him tall, he slouches. In the end, he just becomes a clown. Driver, Leo said suddenly. I need to change the destination. Can you take me to the Tech Plaza instead? Of course, sir. Just update it in the app. Leo fumbled with his phone. Sean, he said, turning to his roommate. Change of plans. We're going to that boxing gym Stella told me about. The one with the membership card she gave me. You can film me for new content. Plus, they serve food. We can score a free meal. It's supposed to be good because it's ridiculously expensive. He left out the part about the basement of the building being a massive electronics market. Sounds good, Sean nodded. We could use some new material. He didn't know the city well. That was the difference between him and Jessica. She was just as broke, but she was an extrovert who worked odd jobs all over the city and knew every corner of it. Sean was quiet, introverted, and rarely left campus. As he confirmed the change of plans, Leo felt a wave of relief. He couldn't let himself believe that being friends with rich people made him rich. He had to be smart, take the bus when it made sense, but enjoy the lobster when the chance came. And if he was going to learn from the wealthy, he needed to learn how they made money, not just how they spent it. He relaxed into his seat. At that moment, the system's voice chimed in his head. Congratulations, host. You have passed the intermediate trophy husband test. You have not lost yourself in a world of material desire. An outstanding trophy husband is not easily swayed by expensive goods or empty praise. He maintains his own firm principles. You are worthy of the best. For passing the intermediate test, you are awarded an intermediate level item. Buff, serene innocence, permanent. From now on, no matter how dire the circumstances, no matter how materialistic the world, you will always possess the pure and noble aura of a lotus flower. Leo stared out the window as the car idled at a red light. Has the system's software not been updated in a few centuries? He thought. Nobody wants to be a white lotus anymore. The manipulative, gorgeous green tea type is what's in style now. The light turned green, and the car merged back into the flow of traffic. Leo caught his reflection in the window. Was it his imagination, or did his eyes now hold a look of serene, almost foolish, innocence? Sitting next to the perpetually dark-clad Sean, he felt like they were a bizarre pair, the Grim Reaper and a lost cherub. At the Crucible boxing gym, Coach Robin Wolf was pounding a heavy bag. Each blow landed with the force of a battering ram, her biceps flexing with raw power. Leo stood off to the side, waiting. Already checked with the front desk about filming. They told him it was normally forbidden to protect the privacy of their members. Leo's brow furrowed slightly. Seeing his expression, the immaculately dressed receptionist immediately backtracked. However, if you're only filming yourself, that should be fine, she amended quickly. Just be sure not to include any other members in your shots. Leo's face broke into a charming smile. Got it. Thank you, ma'am. We'll be careful. The receptionist felt her principles melt away. There was something so earnest and polite about this young man. She couldn't bring herself to refuse him. Leo led Sean into the main gym. It was another new world to explore. The entrance had been a sleek, black glass facade with the words "The Crucible" etched in stark white. Sean had half expected it to be a plastic surgery clinic. He realized this state of being perpetually clueless was actually an asset for filming. His genuine first impressions, the confusion, the awe, mirrored what the audience would feel. His lack of worldliness was, strangely, an advantage. Since acquiring the serene innocence buff, Leo felt his whole demeanor had shifted. His speech had slowed from a 1.2x speed to a relaxed 0.8x. He was less eager to get his words out, which paradoxically made people listen more intently. The buff felt like a veil of vulnerability, cloaking him in a soft, harmless aura. It was the perfect camouflage for a predator, making him seem like easy prey. Not that he needed it, Leo thought. He wasn't exactly a threat to begin with. While they waited, Leo started warming up as Sean began filming. Robin finished her workout and came over, wiping sweat from her brow. She had a natural talent for boxing. She'd recently seen a meme that ranked the fighting prowess of women from different states. California was a 9.8, Texas a 9.2. Her home state of Florida was a measly 2.1. Robin was probably a 9.9. The meme was clearly flawed. Boxing was her passion, and she was lucky enough to make a living from it, though coaching alone didn't pay all the bills. She also did some modeling for sports brands. The new student from yesterday, the college kid, had shown a surprising amount of talent. He was back again today. She understood. Beginners always had a burst of enthusiasm. That's why gyms were constantly pushing new memberships. The old ones usually signed up and then vanished. But this kid had brought a professional photographer with him. Rich kids, she thought with an inward shake of her head. Most people just prop their phone up for a selfie to post on Instagram. This guy hired a crew. Still, she'd seen weirder things from the wealthy clients here. Because they were filming, Robin was extra attentive in her coaching. The kid looked so soft. She was genuinely worried she might break him if she wasn't careful. Today, Leo was a sponge. With the system's real-time feedback and Robin's expert guidance, he picked up the techniques with astonishing speed. Sean filmed intently from the side. He'd never been around boxing before. It was a controlled, disciplined violence, a stark contrast to the boisterous wrestling matches he'd seen back home. Looking through the lens, Sean noticed something was different about Leo today. In person, it wasn't as obvious, but on camera, the change was striking. Leo's aura was calmer, more centered, and, strangely more, delicate. The word popped into Sean's head even as he watched Leo, fists wrapped, pound the heavy bag. Maybe it was just the contrast with Coach Wolf's powerful physique that made him seem smaller, more fragile. Whatever it was, the visual contrast was incredible. This video was going to be gold. After an intense hour, Leo was spent. The system informed him he'd trained for 1 hour, costing him the equivalent of $800 from his account, and in return, had expelled 80% of his pent-up frustrations. He felt as pure and mentally healthy as a lotus. He hit the showers. Stella had already stocked a locker for him with workout clothes and toiletries. While Leo was changing, Sean chatted with Robin. She'd seen him filming and asked about his TikTok. Turns out, she had 1.2 with 34,000 followers, which was impressive for a normal person. She was shocked to learn that the Roommate Chronicles had over 700,000. They immediately followed each other. She tried to ask Sean for filming tips, but his shyness kicked in. Face to face with a stranger, a woman alone, he clammed up. I just film, he mumbled, his expression turning stoic. It wasn't arrogance, it was social paralysis. To break the awkward silence, he offered to film a quick clip of her boxing. The result was stunning. He captured her with a cinematic quality, making her look both beautiful and powerful, a perfect blend of masculine strength and feminine grace. When Leo emerged from the showers, he was surprised to see Sean and Robin getting along. He invited them both to eat. The gym's cafe was no joke. The menu featured dishes like braised short ribs with a fermented bean curd glaze, beef and potato hash, and a sea cucumber and millet porridge. It was all beautifully plated and delicious. After their free meal, Leo led Sean down to the basement level to buy the new equipment. Robin insisted on coming along, saying she had a friend who owned a store and could get them a discount. She immediately wondered why she was being so helpful. It must be because he was a college student, she reasoned. She didn't want him to get ripped off. They ended up spending over $3,000, even with the discount, on a new computer, microphones, a gimbal, and a camera. The price tag struck Sean silent again. The pressure was immense. On the way back, they took a regular Uber. Normally, cars without a university permit were stopped at the gate. Sean was already preparing to haul the heavy boxes the rest of the way to their dorm. But as they pulled up to the security booth, Leo leaned forward and, with his newfound gentle tone, smiled at the guard. "Sir, we just bought a new computer, and it's a little heavy. Would it be okay if the car just dropped us off right at our dorm?" The guard, a notoriously grumpy man, looked at Leo, and his expression softened. "Sure, son. I'll just need to log the car's license plate." He waved them through. Sean stared in disbelief. Did the security guard get replaced by a friendly imposter? He'd seen a professor get into a shouting match with this same guy just last week. Leo just smiled. The Uber dropped them right at the dormitory entrance. Leo felt a strange sense of power. He was pretty sure that if he'd asked the driver to help carry the boxes upstairs, the man would have agreed. He decided not to push his luck. They were hauling the equipment inside when Alex came out, saw them struggling, and immediately turned back to help. Jordan, hearing the commotion, even paused his game to lend a hand. Once everything was in the room, Leo chugged a glass of water. The lunch at the gym had been good, but it must have been loaded with salt or MSG, because he was incredibly thirsty. Sean drained an entire glass jar of water in one go. They got to work, transforming Sean's desk into a state-of-the-art editing station. Jordan marveled at the new clip-on microphone, testing it out and admiring the clear sound quality. Sean, however, was starting to have second thoughts. The reality of the expense was sinking in. Over $3,000. That was more than his family had given him for his entire college education. It was a massive investment. When would they ever make that back? Leo saw the familiar frown return to Sean's face. "Don't worry, man," he said reassuringly. "We've got a ton of partnership requests in our DMs. If we get desperate, we can just take on a sponsorship deal or two. The money will come rolling in." "No way," Sean said instantly. "Absolutely not," Alex chimed in from across the room. "Once you start doing sponsored posts, that's all you'll ever be. There's no going back. If I had a channel this big, I'd pay out of my own pocket to keep it ad-free. The followers are what's valuable, not the ad revenue." Jordan nodded in agreement. "He's right. You guys have so much momentum. You need to focus on the content. My makeup channel is different. It's expected to be commercial. If I don't do sponsorships, people get suspicious. But your channel is about storytelling. You have to protect that." 700,000 followers was a tricky number. It was the point where many creators cashed in. But the smarter move was to keep growing, to focus on quality. 1 million followers was the next major milestone. Then 5 million. At that point, you had real influence. "You heard the guys," Leo said to Sean. "We're not in a rush. We'll take our time." Sean nodded, his resolve strengthened. His ambitions had always been modest. If it weren't for his mother's illness, all he ever wanted was to make enough to get by. Starting something from nothing was hard enough. He wasn't going to squander their success now. He turned back to the new computer, foregoing his afternoon nap to dive into editing. Leo took a short nap himself. The boxing had been more exhausting than he'd realized. When he woke up, feeling refreshed, he headed out to see Dr. Croft for her final massage session. She texted that she was already at her art studio. The woman was relentless. Her right arm was barely functional. What was she planning to do? Paint with her left? When he arrived, Dr. Croft looked much better, her energy restored. But as she saw him, her eyes widened, and she gave him a thorough, puzzled look. Something about him was different, but she couldn't put her finger on it. He seemed to have a kind of fake, pitiable quality about him. It reminded her of a time she'd been eating spicy rabbit heads at a restaurant, crunching on the bones, when a girl at the next table had asked her with wide, sad eyes, "Why would you eat a bunny?" She'd stared back, bewildered, and said, "This is a rabbit head restaurant. What else am I supposed to eat?" Leo now possessed that same innocent bunny vibe. Dr. Croft felt a pang of guilt. Had she done this? When she was painting his portrait for that wealthy patron, she tried to incorporate the woman's tastes. She'd heard the patron liked to lavish gifts on young men who called her Ani in a sweet voice. So she'd painted him with a hint of that calculated innocence, that white lotus quality. And now, looking at him, She was seeing her painting come to life. Leo, oblivious to her internal monologue, had her sit down and began the massage, his hands moving with practiced skill. "Is this too much pressure, Professor?" he asked gently. "Does it hurt?" Dr. Croft gritted her teeth. "Nope, doesn't hurt a bit. Keep going," Leo continued. Dr. Croft felt like her skull was about to explode. "Okay, that should do it for today," Leo said finally. "Try moving your arm." She was lying face down on the sofa, numb with pain. "Right, you go on ahead. I'm just going to lie here for a minute." Leo's next stop was to see Moose. With his thick fur, the golden retriever loved the cold weather. But when the dog saw him, he didn't bound over with his usual enthusiasm. Instead, he let out a few wary barks and circled Leo cautiously, sniffing him from head to toe. Moose looked utterly confused. He was about to lift his leg to mark Leo and confirm his identity when Leo quickly pushed his leg down. "It's me, buddy. Chill out." It wasn't until Leo took him to the street vendor and bought him 4 hot dogs that Moose finally relaxed and started eating. Leo shook his head. "My identity is now verified by sausage. The dog recognizes the food, not the man." In the winter, Moose packed on the pounds, becoming a dense, furry cannonball. Walking him became more of a challenge, mostly because his owners got lazier. Leo's daily walks had dwindled to once every 3 days. But Moose's appetite, spurred on by the cold, had only increased. The once athletic golden retriever was getting fat. Leo took Moose out to scout a new running route, looping around the campus. He decided the main athletic field, with its professional track, was still the best option. As they jogged around the track, Leo's phone buzzed with a text notification, a deposit of $500. It was the prize money President Grant had mentioned. Leo took a screenshot and sent it to her with a thank you note. He used to be afraid of bothering important people like her, but his mindset was shifting. To build deeper connections, you had to interact. Of course, you had to be useful yourself. Otherwise, it was just harassment. He added an offer to treat her to a meal. President Grant replied almost immediately, "Let's have tea sometime." Leo grinned. "Okay, President," he typed back. He was moving up in the world. He had multiple university presidents in his contacts now. He and Moose did a few slow laps. Some girls sitting on the bleachers pretended to take selfies, but were actually snapping pictures of him as he ran past. "Oh my God, so cute," one of them whispered to her friend after he'd passed. "That handsome, broody guy with the golden retriever. Is he a student here? He looks like a celebrity." Leo was vaguely aware of being watched, but he was more relaxed about it now. As long as it didn't interfere with his life, he didn't care. He ran Moose until the dog was panting, then headed back before the dog collapsed, and he had to carry him. During the walk, he took his usual photos of Moose and sent them to Paige. "Mission complete. Dog has been walked." Then, a notification from the system. "Growth plus 0. 1 cm. Leo, all 174. 9 centimeters of him, had finally broken through. He was now officially 175 centimeters tall. He was 5'9". It was a millimeter of a rounding error, something a slightly fluffier hairstyle could achieve. But it was a psychological milestone. This called for a celebration. He was about to text his roommates to go out for dinner when his phone rang. It was Paige. She almost never called him directly. He answered. It wasn't Paige's voice. "Hi, is this Leo?" Paige just choked on a snack. At first, it just hurt a little, so we tried, drinking vinegar and swallowing bread, but now she can't even talk. We're worried she's going to suffocate. Can you help us take her to the hospital? Leo was bewildered. Is it serious? Should you call 911? He could hear muffled whimpering in the background. She says it's too embarrassing to call an ambulance. She just wants to take a cab. From the sound of it, she wasn't suffocating, but she was definitely in pain. What did she choke on? Dried shrimp, the roommate said, trying and failing to suppress a laugh. She was eating too fast and swallowed the head. Leo sighed. Good Lord. In any real crisis, the first person Leo thought of was Alex. He was ridiculously dependable. He hung up and immediately called him. Alex's response was swift and logical. A cab can't get into the dorm area, and an ambulance is overkill. Isn't your car still on campus? I'll go with you. We'll drive her to the ER. Sounds like she just needs a quick laryngoscopy. The university hospital is close by. Leo called Paige's roommate back and told him the plan. He met Alex, who drove them to the honors college dorms. Paige was waiting outside with her roommate. Despite the cold, she was wearing a short skirt over black tights, a fluffy white jacket, and a pink hat with long bunny ears. Her eyes were red and swollen from crying. She gestured wildly, unable to speak. Her roommate did the talking, but her eyes were wide as she stared at Leo. This was the boy Paige was obsessed with? Paige had described him as ordinary, timid, average-looking. This guy was anything but. No wonder she wouldn't shut up about him, even though he had a girlfriend. Seeing him in person, the roommate felt a pang of jealousy herself, and regret. If she'd known he was this handsome, she would have at least put on some makeup. Meanwhile, the patient herself was still dressed to kill. Paige's throat was genuinely hurting, and fresh tears welled in her big eyes. Leo wanted to laugh at the absurdity of someone injuring themselves with a shrimp, but seeing her miserable state, he managed to restrain himself. Alex kept his eyes fixed on the road, a model of propriety. At the hospital, they checked in. The Yinti emergency room was surprisingly busy with people who had choked on fish bones, duck necks, and now a shrimp head. The doctor took one look at Paige, wrote a prescription, and sent her for a laryngoscopy. Paige's eyes, filled with tears, glared at Leo. "What are you looking at me for?" he thought. Paige's roommate was busy chatting up Alex, so Leo was tasked with taking Paige to the procedure. They numbed her throat first. Paige initially refused to let him come in, but at the last second, she grabbed his sleeve, terrified, and wouldn't let go. Leo watched as the doctor told her to stick out her tongue, clamped it with a piece of gauze, and then inserted a long, thin scope down her throat. It was difficult to watch. Paige looked like she wanted to die. After a moment, the doctor announced he'd found it. A sharp piece of the shrimp's rostrum was lodged in her esophagus, which was also scraped and inflamed. "Got it," the doctor said, skillfully extracting the offending spike with a pair of forceps. "There you go. Young lady, eat a little slower next time. Stick to soft foods for a few days. And your throat is quite wide to swallow a whole shrimp head like that." Paige burst into fresh tears. She didn't know what was more humiliating, swallowing the shrimp head or being told she had a wide throat. Leo bit the inside of his cheek to keep from laughing. "It's okay," he whispered as they left. "It was just a shrimp head. No one will ever know." Just then, her roommate ran up to them, holding out her phone, her face ecstatic. "Paige, you're famous." On the screen was a video of Paige's livestream. It showed her enthusiastically reviewing the dried shrimp, popping one after another into her mouth. On the third one, her eyes went wide. The video captured her choking, the panic, the frantic scrambling of her roommates. And then it cut off. The title of the video, Shrimp Head Girl. It already had hundreds of thousands of likes. The video had been reposted everywhere, including by a local news station. A serious-looking anchor was using a clip of Paige choking as a PSA to remind viewers to properly deshell their shrimp. Leo stared at the screen, then at Paige. He and Sean slaved over their videos, and they'd never gone viral like this. It was maddening. His National Tea Ceremony award had gotten less attention than Paige Kennedy choking on a shrimp. Paige looked at the flood of notifications, the new nickname, and started pounding Leo's chest with her small fists. "This is all your fault. You're the one who told me to make videos. Now I'm a national laughingstock." On the drive back, Leo was scrolling through his Facebook feed when he saw it again. Someone had shared a meme, "Deadly Shrimp Head." It was a clip from Paige's live stream, sped up until the moment she choked, which was then played in slow motion. Her cute, chubby cheek face, her big chest, the way her eyes instantly filled with tears. It was a perfect storm of schadenfreude and cuteness. A comment below read, "I hear she goes to Northwood State." Another replied, "LMAO, with that IQ, definitely a college student." Paige Kennedy was officially a viral sensation. Her throat was throbbing from the procedure, and the stomach acid that had come up had made it even worse. She felt miserable. On the ride back, her roommate sat in the front with Alex, while Leo and Paige sat in the back. They dropped her at her dorm, where at least her roommates could look after her. Despite her pain and raspy voice, Paige politely thanked Alex. Alex just waved it off, saying he was just helping Leo. There was no offer of a celebratory dinner. Paige couldn't eat anything anyway. Leo updated their family group chat, the shenanigans, sending a link to the viral video. "Shelly, well, haha, that's hilarious. I'm going to video call and laugh at her." Eleanor Shun. "Paige always does eat too fast." Dr. Shun. "Actually, there's a traditional remedy for this. Remote intervention." He then posted a video of a man in a lab coat making mystical gestures over a bowl of water with 2 chopsticks. Leo, is that traditional medicine or voodoo? Dr. Shun. "The laryngoscopy is painful. That video is mostly for show, but the principle involves using an herbal solution that can soften bones. It's just that nowadays, everyone goes to a Western doctor and endures the pain. She'll be fine in a few days." A lesson learned. After dispensing his wisdom and getting no reply, Dr. Shun sent a $200 Venmo payment to the group. Leo accepted it immediately. Since he and Alex hadn't eaten, They decided to grab a late dinner on the student strip. They texted Sean and Jordan, who were just snacking in the dorm, and told them to come out. Leo was treating. He didn't invite Stella. It was cold out, and he didn't want her overexerting herself. Then he remembered Paige was in the same boat, and that knucklehead had been running around in a short skirt. Jordan had been gaming all day, and his eyes were bloodshot. Sean had been editing nonstop. They stumbled out into the cold night air. Jordan was bundled up like a marshmallow, while Sean was tall and thin. The two of them looked like a comedy duo. The student strip was lively, especially around the outdoor hot pot stalls. A local barbecue joint had set up a huge tent with dozens of low tables and plastic stools, creating a massive, bustling, makeshift restaurant. It was cheap, delicious, and incredibly popular. Should I invite some girls? Leo asked with a grin. Whoa, look at you, Jordan said. Our boy Leo can actually summon women now. Are they cute? Guaranteed, Leo said confidently. You won't be disappointed. Even Alex looked intrigued. Sean just smiled blankly. He was still scarred from his experience with Megan and had zero interest in girls. Leo stepped away to make a call. He'd heard from Dr. Croft that she was planning on heading back to New York soon. She'd used up all her vacation and sick days. He called and asked if she wanted to join them for hot pot. Dr. Croft's response was immediate. Yes. Be right there. She'd asked if Professor Reed wanted to come, but Evelyn Reed had a strict no food after 8 p.m. rule. Leo returned to the table and gave his roommates a thumbs up. Alex quickly ran a hand through his hair. Jordan adjusted his cool-looking sneakers. Sean diligently wiped down their table and stools. Then they all watched as Leo returned, leading a tall woman in a stylish, dress-like down coat and a beret. She was beautiful, no doubt about it, but she was also very clearly 30-plus. Guys, let me introduce you, Leo said. This is my roommate, Jordan Davis, Alex Young, and Sean Riley. And this is Dr. Croft. I told you about her. She's my painting instructor. Dr. Croft, please, have a seat, Alex said, jumping up to offer her a stool with the utmost courtesy. Jordan was glad he wasn't drinking anything, or he would have spat it out. Sean, however, looked like he'd been expecting this all along. They all stood to greet her, only sitting after she had. A beauty, yes, but one who was old enough to be their mother. The wind rattled the plastic tarp overhead, but huddled in the middle of the crowded tent, surrounded by the warmth of dozens of other hot pots. They were comfortable. There was something special about this kind of dining. Low tables, tiny stools, a communal fire. Leo had invited Dr. Croft because, after spending time with her, he'd realized she was a massive extrovert, but one without any pretense. Despite being a dean, she was incredibly easy to be around. The evening was lively. Even Sean seemed relaxed. He'd filmed her before, and he found that he wasn't nervous around people who were completely absorbed in their work. Dr. Croft loved to drink. She was one of those people who talked a big game, but had a low tolerance. She'd take a swig of beer, eat a slice of tender lamb, and laugh so hard the crow's feet around her eyes deepened. They were all seniors, a special breed of student on the verge of being expelled from the academic womb into the real world. Even someone as prepared as Alex felt a sense of unease. He was on the government fellowship track, but where would that lead? He'd recently met a brilliant Yale graduate who was from a big D.C. political family. She'd been on a fast track that had her family boasting, but she'd quit. She'd had a blowout fight with a superior, slammed her fist on his desk, and walked out. Now she was a mid-level manager at a podcasting company in New York. Was she happy? She knew she hadn't been happy before, but she couldn't say for sure if she was happy now. Alex didn't have a Yale degree or a political pedigree. The world was full of uncertainty. Jordan was completely adrift, gaming his life away one day at a time. Sean was the most focused of them all, pouring his energy into their TikTok channel. But even he had doubts. What would happen after graduation? Could he keep filming Leo? Would the channel even make sense once their lives changed? Leo was the most grounded, mainly because he was too busy to be anxious. He was in a good place. The conversation flowed easily around the bubbling pot. Professor, Leo asked, how do you balance your administrative work with your painting? It seems like a lot of artists lose their edge once they get caught up in meetings and bureaucracy, but your work is still so powerful. Alex had to admire Leo's finesse. What a smooth, lotus-like way to ask a question. It was pure flattery disguised as intellectual curiosity. Dr. Croft beamed and took a large gulp of beer. It's simple, she said. When someone asks if I have a minute, I tell them no. I say I'm too tired, I'm getting old, my back hurts, my neck hurts, I have pneumonia, a brain tumor, laryngitis, and allergy to air. Basically, the message is, leave me the hell alone. The four students stared at her, then raised their beers in a toast. They were too young to understand a body that was a constant source of aches and pains. They just thought she was hilarious. But Leo, having worked with her, knew she wasn't entirely joking. She pushed her body to its limits for her art. The joy she got from creating a masterpiece outweighed the pain. Her real fear wasn't illness. It was being healthy but uninspired. Dr. Croft took another drink. A piece of advice: never make a wish at the wishing shrine in Chinatown. The gods there, they'll grant your wish, but there's no customer service. One year, I was in a creative slump, totally blocked. I went there and wished for inspiration. She expertly fished a piece of lamb from the pot, dredged it in chili sauce, and ate it with relish. And damn if it wasn't effective. The next month, my head was bursting with ideas. I lost 15 pounds. I went to the doctor and was diagnosed with severe hyperthyroidism. I was ecstatic, shaky, and my hands trembled so much I couldn't hold a paintbrush. She wagged a finger at them. So if you go, be specific. You have to write your wish like a programmer, with no loopholes. I wished for inspiration to paint. I assumed one would lead to the other. I got the inspiration, but I lost the ability. Jordan, Sean, and Leo laughed. But Alex, a pragmatist to his core, filed the information away. If he ever went to that shrine, he would be crystal clear. For example, I wish for my son to become a governor. And to be clear, that son must be me. The charcoal fire eventually died down, and the hot pot ceased to bubble. Dr. Croft was full, but the boys, being boys, finished off the rest. Sean, a true believer in not wasting food, even drank the last of the broth. On that strange winter night, in a plastic tent on the student strip, the four roommates shared a meal with the Associate Dean of the Bridgeport Institute of Fine Arts. It wasn't love or friendship, but a kind of hot pot kinship, a memory that would stick with them for a long time. For Leo, that meal marked the beginning of a new chapter in his life. After the rich, spicy flavors of Korean barbecue, they were all full and warm. The walk back to the dorm was perfect, letting the cool night air strip the smoky scent from their clothes. Everyone had had just enough to drink to be chatty, but not drunk, a comfortable, easy buzz that seemed to draw them closer. For Dr. Croft, who hadn't had a properly spicy meal since arriving, it was pure satisfaction. She'd been disappointed more than once when the campus diner's so-called chili sauce for their breakfast dumplings turned out to be sweet. Tonight, the spicy pork bulgogi had been genuinely, beautifully hot. Jordan, true to form, had created a dipping sauce concoction of soy sauce, vinegar, and sesame oil, then added a spoonful of sugar, a local quirk they all teased him about. They walked Dr. Croft to the entrance of the faculty housing first, then the four guys headed back to their own dorm. She had enjoyed the evening immensely. Talking with young people was essential for an artist. You had to keep your aesthetic in tune with the times, and every generation had its own subtle shifts in taste. She always felt she gained something from these conversations, but it also signaled the end of a chapter. Her fascination with painting Leo was fading. The appreciation one person has for another is often born from mystery and exploration. Once you become familiar with them, the magic can dissipate. He was no longer an enigma, but a fixed image in her mind, making new creation difficult. At least for now. Perhaps in a few years, if she saw him again, a new spark of inspiration would ignite. But for now, the project felt complete, and the results were more than she could have hoped for. Her health might have taken a hit, but her art had flourished. She vaguely remembered making a half-hearted wish at some shrine once, something like, "I'd give 10 years of my life for a masterpiece." She hadn't felt it then, but now, with a potential masterpiece in hand, she wondered if the price had been paid. Destiny, after all, is a series of equal exchanges. The wind was cool, but their spirits were warm, and their stomachs were full. Back in the dorm, the air was icy. There was no central heating, no AC unit. Jordan had secretly bought a small space heater, but they had to hide it during room inspections. Luckily, Alex Young usually got a heads up from his RA connections, so they'd never been caught. Jordan needed it most, his feet always getting cold during his long League of Legends sessions. He plugged in a heater, and with all four of them back, the room slowly began to warm up. After a quick, shivering trip to the communal bathroom to wash up, Leo dove under his covers. The fourth-floor dorms were getting emptier as more seniors left for internships. A full room like theirs was a rarity. Over in Stella's dorm, only 3 of them remained. And with one more leaving for an internship next week, it would soon be just Stella and Jessica. The dynamics of female friendships were a strange thing. For 3 years, Stella and Jessica had maintained a polite but distant relationship. But recently, ever since Stella started dating Leo, the ice between them had mysteriously thawed. There was no single reason for it, but they were closer now than ever. The friendship in Leo's dorm had deepened too, though in a more straightforward way. The trip to Sean's hometown had been transformative. It wasn't just about understanding Sean and his family. It was about seeing a world completely different from their own. It had been a form of education you couldn't get from a textbook. Before that trip, their definition of poor was not being able to afford the latest iPhone. Now, they understood that true poverty was waiting to die in a hospital bed because you couldn't afford treatment. That realization had hit Alex, Jordan, and Leo hard. It was a sobering, necessary part of growing up. Full, tipsy, and tired, they mumbled half-formed conversations until, one by one, the sound of snoring filled the room. The next morning, Leo woke up later than usual, a rare occurrence. He blinked, staring at the faint red glow of the system's running stats hovering before his eyes, feeling a bit dazed. Doesn't this thing have a winter mode? He grumbled internally. It should give me an extra half hour when it's this cold. He checked his phone. 6:30 a.m. His left hand was numb from sleeping on it, and the joint of his thumb still ached from overuse, though it wasn't swollen. The little bit of alcohol from a night before left his head feeling stuffy, a sensation made worse by the cold wind. He wondered how Dr. Croft was holding up. As Leo got up to wash, Sean stirred and rose as well. Alex and Jordan remained buried under their blankets, refusing to brave the cold. Leo mixed himself a glass of honey water, surprised to find he'd finished the entire jar Stella had given him. The cheap, plastic bottle of honey he'd had before seemed to last forever, but this imported stuff was gone in a flash. It was too cold to spend much time on the toilet. Getting dressed for his run was a dilemma. Too few layers and he'd freeze. Too many and he wouldn't be able to move. Then he remembered the running gear Stella had bought him. He pulled on the soft, wind-resistant pants and jacket. It was light and comfortable. Stella was on her period, 7 days, he assumed, so he didn't wake her. He'd run alone. He jogged to their usual spot and saw Professor Reed and Dr. Croft already there. Dr. Croft was leaning against a tree with her eyes closed, looking fragile but intact. Professor Reed was energetically slapping her arms and torso, creating a series of loud, popping sounds. The sky was clear and bright, promising a sunny day. Dr. Croft, despite a good night's sleep, had been dragged out of bed by her friend. "You ate so much last night," Professor Reed had insisted. "You have to move a little." Dr. Croft was already planning her trip back home, and she realized with a strange pang of emotion that she would miss these forced early morning workouts. Seeing Leo approach, looking fresh and energetic, she felt a wave of envy. Youth was a wonderful thing. Then she glanced at Professor Reed, who, despite her age, was a bundle of boundless energy. Okay, so maybe it was just her. Leo greeted them and then headed toward Hargrove Hall. He no longer had to run past the flower garden and the fountain with that slightly embarrassing red banner, though he could still see it in the distance. The banner, he figured, was like a period. It would hang around for about a week unless a VIP visit or a major event forced it down. The large track at Hargrove Hall was empty. Leo did one lap before others started to trickle in. A girl bundled in a thick, long down coat, hood up, walked slowly with a book in her hand, reciting passages aloud. As he ran past her, he could just catch the murmur of her voice. After another 2 laps, a few more students appeared, all walking and studying. He was the only one running. He hadn't had a proper run in a while, and the professional track felt amazing under his feet. He missed the view of the lake, but the springy, reddish surface made him feel like he could take flight. He ran for a solid half hour before slowing to a walk. By now, the track was bustling with the vibrant, hopeful faces of students, walking, talking, studying, running. The rising sun bathed half the field in a warm, golden light. Leo took a deep breath, soaking it in. Winter had come early this year. His breath plumed in the cold air, but the sunlight on his skin created the illusion of warmth. Leo left the track, feeling invigorated. His legs were a little sore, but his mind was clear and his mood was bright. Running wasn't just physical exercise. It was an exchange of breath, a release of emotion, a truly positive feedback loop. One small step for man, one giant leap for mankind, or something like that. Suddenly, he had an intense craving for fresh, hot donuts, the kind that were crispy on the outside and soft on the inside, perfect for dipping in coffee. That, plus a loaded everything bagel. It would be perfect. He found a food truck on a student strip and watched the owner drop rings of dough into the hot oil, mesmerized as they puffed up. He ordered 4 donuts, a large coffee, a bagel with cream cheese and bacon, and a hard-boiled egg. He devoured it all, then drained the last of his coffee. Pure satisfaction. As he ate, he messaged Stella. "You up?" She replied a moment later. "Just got up." She always slept in a little when she was on her period, her body demanding a bit more rest. Leo, I'll bring you breakfast. He sent a picture of the glistening donuts. Stella, okay. 3. Remembering her 2 roommates, he bought 6 more donuts, 3 coffees, and 3 apple fritters. He paid the owner a little extra for an insulated bag and hurried toward the women's dorms. The owner gave him a knowing look. Ah, young love. Leo felt a flush of embarrassment. He used to roll his eyes at guys like this, thinking, doesn't she have legs? Can't she get her own damn breakfast? And yet, here he was, sprinting across campus, worried the donuts would get cold. Horrifying. He had become the very simp he used to mock. A donut is a completely different species when it's cold. Stella was waiting downstairs. She had washed her face and pulled her semi-long hair back with a simple clip. She had on a down jacket and had a scarf in her hand. People who've had short hair know the struggle of growing it out, that awkward, shapeless in-between stage. Stella had a feeling Leo preferred long hair. He never said it, but sometimes when they hugged, he would gently stroke her head or run his fingers through her hair. So, she was letting it grow. Normally she'd just tie it up in a messy top knot, but today she looked effortlessly chic. The boys' dorms were separated from the girls by a short walk and a large iron gate, where a security guard was posted. Leo felt a little shy running up, but he was not alone. 2 other guys were already waiting, a small brotherhood of simps. They nodded at him in mutual understanding. He watched as a heavy-set girl came running out, the gate seeming to shake with her momentum. Leo saw a tall guy, at least 6'2", waiting nearby, and figured he was her boyfriend. He stepped aside, but to his surprise, the girl ran into the arms of a much shorter, skinnier guy. Opposites attract, he guessed, but her voice was incredibly sweet. Baby, are you cold? Thank you for coming to get me. Moi. Can we get bubble tea after class? It was oddly charming. Then another girl came out, prettier than the first, but with a sour expression. She marched up to the tall guy. I told you I don't like dumplings. Why do you always bring me dumplings? They're disgusting. I wanted a breakfast burrito. A breakfast burrito? The burrito place doesn't open until 11, the tall guy pleaded, bending down to her level. I'll bring you one for lunch, okay? Leo just shook his head. That guy's got the patience of a saint. He didn't have time to watch the rest of the show, because his girl finally appeared. She was adorable, a little yellow duck-shaped clip in her hair, a smile lighting up her face and deepening the dimple in her right cheek. He wanted to hug her, but his hands were full of breakfast. Eat it while it's hot, he said, handing her the bag. Stella took the bag and then wrapped the large orange scarf she was holding around his neck. I figured you ran straight here and were probably cold. Thanks for breakfast. I'm heading back up. We can run together when I feel better. She waved and turned back toward her dorm, not wanting his effort to go to waste. Leo watched her go, then turned to leave, feeling incredibly lucky. First, she was beautiful. Second, despite her cool exterior, she was never spoiled or demanding. She was thoughtful. The other girl had asked her boyfriend if he was cold, but Stella had brought him a scarf. He wrapped the plush cashmere around his neck. It was incredibly warm. It had better be for what it probably cost. The other 2 guys watched him go with complicated expressions. We're all simps, their eyes seemed to say, but why does he get the jackpot? He passed the campus diner and ducked in to grab some mediocre breakfast for his roommates. It was the natural order of things, romance before bromance. As long as the food was edible, they'd call him a hero. Back in her room, Stella opened the bag. The donuts were still warm. She knew Leo had bought extra for her roommates, so she called them over. Jessica's period was on its last day. The first few days were always brutal, but she usually just pushed through it, ignoring the discomfort. Sometimes for a part-time job, she'd have to get up at the crack of dawn to wash her long hair, a tedious process involving boiling her own water in their poorly equipped dorm. But she did it without complaint. Her experience had taught her that appearance was everything. Show up looking polished and professional, and you get treated better. She could often command $15 an hour for jobs where others got $12. It all came at a cost. She rarely ate for pleasure. She ate for convenience, speed, and cost-effectiveness. Guys had asked her out, bought her breakfast, but nothing ever came of it. She didn't have time for a purely romantic relationship. While boys were dreaming of holding hands at the movies, she was calculating how much she could earn in those 2 hours. She tried dating, but it never worked. She had come to realize that earning her own money was the most secure way to live. The donut, soaked in the warm, sweet coffee, was delicious. Back in his dorm, Leo was greeted with several declarations of "you're the man." His roommates dutifully Venmo'd him the money for their breakfast. Even Sean, who was always the most meticulous about paying his share, sent the cash immediately. Jordan eyed the huge orange scarf. Orange is actually a pretty nice color, he mused. I used to think it was tacky, but there was this viral hot felon photo going around, and the guy was wearing an orange jumpsuit. He looked amazing. Everyone was saying he was too handsome to be guilty. He pulled up the photo on his phone. Damn, the guy was handsome. He made the orange jumpsuit look like couture. It looks good on you too, Leo, Jordan said, taking a bite of his bagel. Dating has made you more stylish. Behind every handsome man is a woman with great taste. Jordan himself cared about his appearance, but his weight meant everything he wore ended up looking like streetwear. Alex envied him too. His own style was what he called junior staffer chic, a look he'd been teased for by underclassmen. But he tried other styles, and they looked even worse. His seemingly plain outfits were, in fact, the result of careful selection. Sean couldn't care less about fashion, but he was mesmerized by the photo. Look at the composition of this shot, he said, the angle, the movement of the crowd, the expressions. This isn't just a perp walk. It's a photo that could be in a history book. The photographer is a master. Suddenly inspired, he finished his food and said, Leo, let's shoot today's video. Wear the orange scarf. We can ride this wave. While Leo changed, he scrolled through TikTok. The video Sean had posted last night of unboxing had done well, racking up over 30,000 likes overnight. But then he saw it, a video of the shrimp head girl. Over 500,000 likes. Overnight. It was just a clip of her eating shrimp heads in her dorm room. It made no sense. This girl, Paige, had eaten so many shrimp heads she'd ended up in the hospital. The look of pure, unadulterated foolishness in her tear-filled eyes was apparently social media gold. TikTok loved that kind of raw, unfiltered content. You could build a professional set and get no views, but a shaky phone video of something genuinely stupid could go viral. The platform craved authenticity, even if it was manufactured. The video also blew up because it was so shareable, fitting perfectly into the fragile college student meme. A photo of her eating shrimp heads, followed by a clip of her getting an endoscopy. In the middle of it all, Leo had sent a few of the stills to Paige, mostly to tease her. She'd taken it in stride, apparently no longer in pain, and had even posted a follow-up. She had somehow managed to catch the wave of her own ridiculous fame. You couldn't get jealous of something like that. He and Sean had a whole setup, a strategy. She had nothing. It was pure dumb luck. Leo put on a black overcoat, the bright orange of the scarf, a stark contrast. Sean grabbed his new, more professional camera gear, and they headed out. At first, Sean had been self-conscious about filming in public, but now he had an unshakable, professional demeanor. Leo, on the other hand, felt a little bit of that influencer pressure. But Northwood students were generally respectful. They might stare or take a sneaky photo pretending it was a selfie, but they wouldn't bother him. They went to the classroom where the study grind NPC, Colin Edwards, was always present. Today, Winnie Lou was there too. They both looked up as Leo entered, followed by Sean and his professional-looking camera rig. It was a step up from the last time, when Sean had just used his phone. Leo handed them both some yogurt drinks, a small apology for the disruption. He gave one to another student he didn't recognize as well. Then he settled into his usual spot and opened a book. Even with the camera on him, he was genuinely studying. Faking it would be pointless, like faking a workout just for an Instagram post. You might fool others for a bit, but you couldn't fool yourself. He opened his accounting textbook. Other things might deceive him. The system might deceive him. But knowledge, once learned, was his forever. He focused, pushing away the distractions of his phone, the urge to chat, the random need to go to the bathroom. He studied diligently for an hour while Sean filmed for 30 minutes, then edited on his laptop in the back of the room. The shot was beautiful. The boy in the orange scarf, focused on his book, the classroom providing a backdrop that was nostalgic for millions of adults. After an hour, his brain felt full, like it was overflowing with information. He and Sean packed up and headed to the library. No wonder he felt like he was stagnating. He hadn't been to the library in ages. Sean filmed as they walked, capturing the boy in the orange scarf against the backdrop of the lake and the academic buildings. It was a beautiful, aesthetic shot, interrupted by the boy licking the foil lid of his yogurt. In the library's new arrival section, Leo's eyes were drawn to a bright red book, The Pomodoro Technique. It looked interesting, and the color matched his scarf. He picked it up and found a place to sit. He had grabbed it on a whim, but from the first page, he was hooked. It was a simple but brilliant concept. He had felt himself hitting a wall with his studies recently. It wasn't a lack of time. He had the time dilation buff for that, but a lack of efficiency. He was a master procrastinator. The Pomodoro technique was straightforward. Set a timer for 25 minutes and focus on a single task. If you get distracted, the timer is void. You reset. After one successful Pomodoro, you take a short break. The book was thin and he read it cover to cover, fascinated. Why hadn't he found this sooner? If he'd known this in high school, maybe he'd be at a different university. But then, he wouldn't have met his roommates. He opened the timer on his phone, set it for 25 minutes, and picked up a difficult economics textbook. For the first 10 minutes, he was locked in. Then his mind started to wander. He resisted. With 6 or 7 minutes left, he was shocked at how quickly the time had passed. In the last 3 minutes, his resolve wavered, but he pushed through. When the timer buzzed, he was amazed. Without using the time dilation buff, he had accomplished more in those 25 minutes of real time than he usually did in an hour. It was a huge breakthrough. He stood up and stretched, feeling a deep sense of accomplishment. Even without a system reward, he had already won. After a session of intense, focused studying, his brain entered a state of total burnout. You could have handed him a book with all the answers to the universe, stripped of its cover, and he wouldn't have been able to read a single word. His mind was blank, his eyes vacant. He stared out the window, completely zoned out. It had only been 25 minutes, but it had taken all of his concentration. How did some people study for hours on end? His hands were trembling slightly. He took a sip of water to steady himself. During those 25 minutes, he'd fought off the urge to look at the bookshelves, to glance at the girl studying across from him, to watch the professor at the front of the room who kept scratching his head as if digging for treasure. It was a constant battle to force his attention back to the book. But he had persisted, and the results were undeniable. His gaze fell on the golden letters of the Vance Athenaeum, glinting on the building across the campus green. In that moment, the name didn't seem so distant or unattainable. Life was made up of countless 25-minute intervals. He got up and wandered through the stacks, a pleasant feeling of restocking his brain. Just being in a library gave him the illusion of becoming smarter, as if knowledge could be absorbed through osmosis. The books on the new arrival shelf were being checked out quickly. They were different from the older books, smaller, with more illustrations. His copy of the Pomodoro Technique was barely bigger than a notebook. Next to it was another slim volume, The Philosopher's Dog, which seemed to distill the ideas of history's greatest thinkers into bite-sized, easily digestible summaries. It was efficient, but it lacked the joy of discovery. It was like being presented with a person, naked and ready, bypassing the entire process of getting to know them. It was AI-style learning, information input, not true understanding. He picked up another book, 100 Little Ways to Recharge Your Energy. It was full of simple, illustrated suggestions. Take a walk, eat instant ramen, look at the ocean, drink tea, open a package, change your bed sheets. Seeing these mundane activities framed as restorative made him feel a little better about his own life. The price tag said $25. Nice, he thought. I just saved myself $25. He recommended the Pomodoro book to Sean, who waved him off. I already checked it out while you were reading, he said. It's not really for me. My work is shooting all day. I can't break it into 25-minute chunks. Maybe I'll try it for editing, though. Sean's footage from the day was beautiful. The pop of the orange scarf in the stately, quiet library was visually striking. But he knew that a feed full of purely aesthetic shots would get boring. That's why people did crazy things to get attention, like swallowing shrimp heads. Today's shoot was a calculated move to piggyback on the hot felon meme, and Sean was already imagining the side-by-side comparison shots. As they left the library and headed to the student strip for lunch, the system's mechanical voice chimed in his mind. Daily reward for accounting study, scar removal. Area, chin. Useful, Leo thought. The other night with Stella, despite nothing happening, he had somehow developed a stress pimple on his chin. He'd picked at it, leaving a small mark. This would fix it. Host has proactively learned and verified a new study method. Mastering the method of learning is a step beyond mastering knowledge. Reward, buff, can persist in one thing for 25 minutes, 3 days. Side effects are random. Use with caution. Leo scoffed. What a useless reward. He was young and full of vigor. He could persist in anything for 25 minutes, except maybe holding a plank. While Leo was at the library, Stella was idling in her dorm room. She had intended to study, but time just seemed to slip away. With only 3 people left, the dorm room dynamic was strange. It was one thing to share a breakfast brought by a roommate's boyfriend. It was another to have that breakfast be donuts, coffee, and fritters. To be honest, Jessica had never expected Stella to date anyone, let alone a student from Northwood State. She had pictured her with the heir to some fortune or the son of a senator. Seeing her with a regular guy, seeing her fall from that untouchable pedestal, somehow made her more approachable. Was that why their relationship had warmed up? During breakfast, their other roommate, Tessa, had bluntly asked, "So, have you two slept together yet?" Stella paused. This was the downside of closeness. People felt entitled to ask intrusive questions. Jessica's eyes widened with curiosity over her apple fritter. Stella coolly replied, "You went on that trip to Maine with your boyfriend over the summer, right? I saw your pictures. Whatever you two did, we did." Tessa tore a piece from her donut. "Oh, that. We were online friends for 2 years. Before we met, I was so excited. My heart would race just from his goodnight texts. But when we finally met in person, the feeling was just gone. He wasn't a catfish or anything. He looked like his pictures, but I don't know. I just didn't like him as much in person." Stella understood. Online, he was a projection of Tessa's desires. In reality, he was just a person. She had wondered if her feelings for Leo were the same, just an attraction to an idea she had built in her head. Tessa turned to Jessica. "Hey, what about that sophomore who was after you? The one who lit all those candles for you on the quad? He was tall and handsome, and I heard his family is military brass. And what about that guy from the Japanese department, Henry something? He was always sending you flowers." "They were in love with the idea of the English department beauty, not with me," Jessica said flatly. "I'm too busy working to correct their poor judgment." In a group chat that didn't include Jessica, the other two had often gossiped about how many guys pursued her. Stella never participated. She disliked the way they would tear Jessica down while simultaneously propping her up by comparison. Jessica, wanting to change the subject, pulled out a deck of tarot cards from her drawer. "I can read your fortunes," she announced. "Let's see what your love life holds." She'd learned the basics from a professional reader she'd met while working at a restaurant one summer. The woman had taken a liking to Jessica's diligent service and taught her a few things. For regular people, the woman had said, you just need to memorize a few scripts. Tessa was immediately hooked. "Do me first." "My teacher always said you have to charge a fee before a reading, even just a penny, to represent an equal exchange," Jessica explained with a smile. "It makes the reading better. Just Venmo me whatever." She washed her hands, wrapped a large shawl around her pajamas, and sat cross-legged on her bed. She even placed a small crystal geode, a free gift from some live stream she'd watched, next to the cards, creating an instant mystical atmosphere. As she shuffled the deck, her long, slender fingers moving gracefully, she looked like a bohemian fortune-teller. Stella watched, impressed. Whatever Jessica did, she did it with flair. Stella didn't believe in tarot. If fate were that simple, life would be easy. Tessa, however, was all in, sending Jessica a generous $20. She washed her hands and asked, "Tell me if my boyfriend and I are going to break up or stay together. He wants me to move to his city after graduation." "Draw 3 cards," Jessica instructed, fanning the deck out. "They represent the past, present, and future." Tessa carefully selected 3 cards: the Tower, the Page of Cups, and the 10 of Swords. Jessica's expression grew somber. The Tower represents your past. Your relationship was built on a high, pure foundation. The Page of Cups shows your lover is a trustworthy, youthful presence. Tessa nodded along, but her eyes were fixed on the 3rd card. The 10 of Swords depicted a figure lying face down with 10 swords in its back. You didn't need to be a psychic to get the gist of that. "The 10 of Swords," Jessica said, her voice soft but the words sharp, "signifies a devastating blow. All hope will be lost. It represents extreme pain, despair, and a final, painful end. But it is also a liberation, the end of a difficult period, allowing you to start a new chapter." Tessa went pale. "That's terrifyingly accurate," she whispered. "We've been fighting constantly." Now Stella was intrigued. Jessica turned to her. "Your turn." Stella nodded and sent Jessica $200. Jessica accepted it without flinching. After shuffling, she laid out the cards. Stella drew 3: the Fool, the World, and the Ace of Swords. Jessica studied them. "If it's bad, you don't have to tell me," Stella said quickly. "If I only said good things, it wouldn't be accurate," Tessa chimed in. "I don't like hearing bad news, even if it's just a game," Stella insisted. Jessica spoke with a serious tone. "The past is the Fool. It represents someone who follows their own path with blind courage, ignoring convention and public opinion to pursue a new beginning." "That's so you?" Tessa marveled. Stella had to agree. "The present is the world. It symbolizes completion, harmony, and the process of creation turning into a satisfying, happy reality." "Meaning she's happy in her relationship now," Tessa translated, smiling. Then came the final card, the Ace of Swords. It showed a hand emerging from a cloud, grasping a sword that pierced a crown. "The Ace of Swords foretells a challenge, but also immense power," Jessica explained. "The sword is a double-edged weapon. It can create or destroy. It symbolizes an extreme force, a mixture of love and hate. It's a warning that power, if used carelessly, can have disastrous consequences. Stella fell silent. It felt right. It was as if the cards had said everything and nothing at all. Unsettled, she took a picture of the Ace of Swords and sent it to Leo. He was just leaving the library when he got the text. He looked at the picture, confused. "What's this?" Stella replied, "I had a tarot reading about our relationship. This card is our future." Leo looked at the image of the hand, thrusting the sword through the crown. He thought about the system's recent reward. His face turned beet red. "Leo, okay. Domega. No matter how mature a guy seems, some things will always turn his brain to mush." Stella saw the blushing emoji and wanted to throttle him. Thankfully, neither of them took this stuff too seriously. Leo figured Jessica had picked up tarot as another side hustle. The woman was a machine. He was still amazed she had managed to pay him back $10,000 already. Without the system, he doubted he could save that much in a year of working after graduation. He and Sean grabbed lunch, and he got a takeout container of braised eggplant over rice for Jordan. Alex was out for the afternoon. While they were eating, he remembered Paige and her endoscopy. He sent her a text to check in. Paige's roommates were all there, sadistically eating a feast of spicy crawfish in front of her, while she could only sip a cold yogurt. The dorms in the honors college were a world apart from Leo's. They had to hide a tiny space heater. Paige's room had a refrigerator and air conditioning. The dorm fees were, accordingly, much higher. Paige and her roommates all came from similar well-off backgrounds and got along well. As her roommate had put it, rich people have more options. Paige's injury was a source of great amusement for them. "He's so handsome," one of them gushed, having met Leo yesterday. "And so nice. You really fumbled the bag, Paige. We could have had him visiting our dorm all the time." "In your dreams," Paige croaked, her voice rough. "He wasn't that handsome before he started dating. And besides, he's practically family now. Stop drooling." "Whatever. You're famous now, Paige. You could get any guy you want." That stung. Famous as the shrimp head girl. It was practically a new slur. Her sister, Shelley, had called and told her to lie low until the hype died down. But her follower count had jumped from 1,000 to over 30,000. 30,000 people were so bored they followed a girl who swallowed a shrimp head. It was baffling. When she saw Leo's text asking if she'd eaten, her eyes welled up. This was all his fault for making her a spectacle. The viral fame had brought a slew of creepy comments along with the funny ones. Paige drank some yogurt. Image, a cartoon rabbit lying dead on the floor. Leo, you can probably eat some soft bread or something. I'll come by to walk Moose later. Paige, okay. Image, the dead rabbit with the caption, leave a message at the tone. Seeing her meme game was still strong, he figured she'd be fine. On the way back to the dorm, he and Sean discussed Paige's TikTok account, the cutest Paige. Going from 1,000 to nearly 40,000 followers was a huge leap. It meant she could monetize it if she wanted to. Of course, the viral video was an anomaly. Her other posts still only got a few hundred likes. In contrast, their roommate Chronicles account was growing steadily, now at over 700,000 followers. Every video got at least 10,000 likes, and they were inundated with collaboration offers. They could start a small company with that kind of following. But Leo didn't need the money, and Sean's only financial worries were his mom's medical bills and his sister's education. His mother's treatment was a long-term process, and thanks to Leo's godfather, Director Shun, the county hospital was getting its own dialysis machines next month, much of which would be covered by insurance. His sister was also receiving an $800 monthly grant, which was more than enough to live on in their town. Sean knew this was the biggest opportunity of his life. Those viral fads burn out fast, he told Leo, sensing his thoughts. People who follow that stuff are just looking for the next weird thing. We're building a real foundation. We have a loyal audience. We just need to keep making good content and figure out what they like best. We're almost at 1 million followers. I can feel it. Leo had been about to offer Sean some reassurance, but Sean had beaten him to it. Yeah, Leo said, his own confidence bolstered. To 1 million. He took Sean's heavy backpack of camera gear to give him a break. The two walked back to the dorm under the bright winter sun. Not so long ago, on a similar walk, Sean had said his dream was to be able to afford 2 bowls of instant ramen at once. Now, his dream was to get their channel to 1 million followers. They were always moving forward. The campus was a mix of bare and evergreen trees. A few pomelos hung from a tree, unpicked. A bountiful year. Leo was 21. Sean was 23. They took a short nap that afternoon. The day felt off schedule because Sean had been filming, which meant they'd skip their usual post-library swim. Besides, they had to take Dr. Croft to the airport for her evening flight. Leo slept for half an hour. It was easy to fall asleep after a mentally taxing study session. When he woke up, he got ready and headed out, but not before texting Dean Roberts to let him know Dr. Croft was leaving today. It seemed like the polite thing to do. He arrived at the faculty housing early, thinking he could help with her luggage. But the university's driver, Walt, was already waiting downstairs. Leo greeted him and the security guard, then went up. Professor Reed was practically vibrating with impatience. Dr. Croft was moving at a glacial pace, still packing for a flight that afternoon. Professor Reed was tempted to pack for her, but she didn't want to seem like she was kicking her out. Finally, just as Leo arrived, the last suitcase was snapped shut. Leo had brought a gift. Through Joy Run, he'd acquired a high-end travel tea infuser, a sleek, double-lidded thermos in a muted olive green. He'd also gotten some Phoenix oolong tea, a fragrant and delicate brew that was notoriously expensive. As Dr. Sterling's supposed protege, he got everything it cost, but the mug and tea still set him back about $300. It was a small gesture compared to the priceless painting and expensive art supplies Dr. Croft had given him. She was delighted, immediately placing the thermos in her carry-on bag. "I've already put the tea leaves in," she said with a smile. "I'll add hot water after I get through security. I love this aroma. It's like sitting in a flower garden after a spring rain." Then her expression turned serious. "Just because I'm leaving doesn't mean you can slack off. You have a gift, but I may have taught you a rather draining method of painting where you pour your very essence into the work. You should practice still lives to keep your hand in. I've left a full set of supplies for you in the studio. They're yours now." Professor Reed sighed in relief. Finally, she was acting like a teacher. She walked them downstairs, but didn't plan on going to the airport. To her surprise, Dean Roberts was waiting there too. "Dr. Croft, I wouldn't have known you were leaving today if Leo hadn't told me," he said, shaking her hand warmly. "I'm so glad I could see you off. Please accept this small token from our region, a set of artisanal, locally made stationery." Dr. Croft was a bit flustered. She was an artist, not an administrator, and had kept a low profile during her stay. Dean Roberts, however, shot Leo a grateful look. It would have been a major faux pas to let such a distinguished guest leave without a proper farewell. "By the way, Dean Roberts, Dr. Croft said suddenly, I have a favor to ask. The studio I've been using, could you allow Leo to continue working there? He has immense talent. I've taken him on as my student. In fact, I'm rushing back for an exhibition, and I plan to include some of his work." Of course, the dean agreed readily. He would have done it for Leo anyway, but a request from Dr. Croft carried even more weight. The kid was incredible. He'd only just met her a few weeks ago, and now he was her prized pupil. Leo just smiled politely as he and Walt loaded the luggage into the car. "Do you have her ID?" Professor Reed asked, doing a final check. "Phone, keys, wallet?" Dr. Croft patted her pockets. "All here. I'll make sure she gets to her gates safely, Professor," Leo promised. As the car pulled away, Dr. Croft stuck her head out the window and waved. "I'll come visit again soon, Evelyn," she shouted. "I'll stay with you for a while." Professor Reed's smile froze on her face. A wave of panic washed over her. Please no, she thought desperately. She loved her solitary life, her quiet, orderly routine. Having her chaotic friend around had been exhausting. The 70-year-old had spent the last month taking care of someone 30 years her junior. "Don't come back," she silently begged. "I'm too old to bury my friends." Walt drove a little too aggressively for Leo's taste. He was becoming a connoisseur of chauffeurs. Professor Hoffman's driver was a former soldier who drove with silky smooth precision. Alex Young was also an incredibly steady driver, unflappable in the face of traffic and honking horns. Driving with him was a strangely calming experience. The university's driver, Walt, was skilled but lacked finesse. He was a classic old hand, a bit of cynic. Seeing Dr. Croft looking a little green around the gills, Leo asked Walt to slow down a bit. He offered her some Dramamine from a packet Sean had given him long ago. She shook her head. "I feel like motion sickness pills scramble my brain. It's like the moment right before they put you under for surgery." Since opening a window would be too cold, Leo tried to distract her with conversation. "That award you were nominated for, the Alexander Lucci Prize? I looked it up. It's a huge deal. Only one artist from our country has ever won it, right? Art is a strange thing," she said, sniffing a tangerine Professor Reed had forced into her hand. The citrus scent helped settle her stomach. "My philosophy is that creation deserves to be seen. You pour your heart into a piece, and while it won't resonate with everyone, it will find its audience. I never rush my work. I would rather not paint at all than create something without my whole soul in it." It was the creed of a true artist, one who sacrificed for their craft. "Getting nominated was a surprise," she continued. her voice calm. Winning depends on so many factors: politics, judges, global trends. It's on my hands now, so I try not to worry. The conversation worked. By the time they reached the airport bridge, she was feeling much better. Walt dropped them at the departure's curb, saying he'd circle around until Leo was done. Leo helped Dr. Croft with her luggage. Her business class ticket meant she could use the priority security line. He waited until she was through before calling Walt. He had planned to stay in the city, but Walt insisted on waiting for him. "I've got nothing else to do this afternoon, kid. This was my only assignment. It's no trouble." Walt was a pragmatist. A dean from the capital was a distant entity. This kid right here, the one who was friendly with his own boss, Dean Roberts, was someone worth keeping on his good side. It was the kind of calculus that defined guys like him. Alex had told him stories about young officials being sent to new posts only to be subtly sabotaged by their cynical, veteran drivers. Walt was one of those guys. Leo had learned that you had to treat different people differently. With an earnest artist like Dr. Croft, you had to be direct and show your talent. With a seasoned academic like Professor Reed, you had to be diligent and respectful. With a guy like Walt, you had to project a little authority. When Leo had first met him and been polite, Walt had ignored him. The more Leo treated him like a driver, the more eager to please he became. "Where to, Mr. Foster?" Walt asked as they drove away from the airport. "There's a boxing club downtown. I'm going to get a workout in. It'll be about an hour and a half. The VIP parking is free if you want to wait. They have a lounge with snacks." "Sounds great," Walt said, his eyes lighting up. "I'll come up with you. See how the other half lives." When I was a kid, those old gangster movies were all the rage. Me and my buddies would watch them and then go get into fights. The other day on TikTok, I saw the actor who played the main gangster. He's a senator now. We all wanted to join the mob because of him, and he ended up joining the government. Leo laughed. Old drivers were all amateur comedians. The massive, imposing entrance to the Crucible boxing gym made Walt's jaw drop. So this was how rich people lived. Leo, on the other hand, projected an air of calm nonchalance, though inwardly he was just as impressed. This was only his third time here. He had managed to keep his composure in front of Stella, but now, seeing Walt's wide-eyed awe, he felt a flicker of pride. Coach Wolf was waiting for him. Seeing him arrive with a driver this time confirmed her suspicions. This kid was definitely some rich family's young master. She had pegged him as a bit of a lightweight who needed protection. Before they started, Leo mentioned the pain in his thumb. Robin took his hand, gently palpating the joint. "It's just muscle strain, not a fracture," she said. "We'll take it easy on your hands today. Focus on footwork, body mechanics, and breathing." "Does this happen to you a lot?" he asked. She took off her glove and showed him her hand. The edge of her thumb was a thick, hard callus. "Success has a price," she said. Her hand felt like iron. Walt, meanwhile, had been relegated to the role of a glorified bag carrier. He watched as the pretty, pigtailed coach led Leo away. He couldn't help but feel a little suspicious. Was this place really a gym? Maybe it was one of those companion services he'd heard about. But then Coach Wolf took off her jacket, revealing a pair of seriously toned biceps, and Walt revised his opinion. This was legit, very legit. But then he saw Leo touching her hand. Maybe the kid had specific tastes. A server brought him a menu. It listed things like black truffle and foie gras sliders with no prices. Feeling out of his depth, he just ordered a chocolate milkshake. He watched Leo train, his mind wandering again. For a guy who was here to box, he wasn't doing much hitting. Instead, the coach was constantly adjusting his arms, touching his legs. Rich people had some weird hobbies. "By the way, Mr. Foster," Coach Wolf said during a break, "are you an influencer? Someone posted a video from our gym, and our membership signups for the quarter have gone through the roof. They're just the basic tier, but still, in this economy, it's impressive." "Oh yeah, I have a few followers," Leo said. "What's a basic membership here?" $10,000. Leo had seen the itemized receipts the gym sent him. A single session cost nearly $300, $120 for the coach, plus fees for the facilities and refreshments whether you ate them or not. At that rate, $10,000 would get you about 30 sessions, probably fewer if you used the more advanced holographic training rooms. "I don't really know much about it," Leo admitted honestly. "My girlfriend got me the membership. She brought me here. I just think it's fun." The coach nodded. She knew who his girlfriend was, but the gym had a strict confidentiality policy. Even without the intense sparring, the focus on technique and footwork was incredibly helpful. He felt the movements finally click into place. A real opponent wasn't a static heavy bag. They moved, and you had to be able to move with them. After an hour of dedicated practice, the system's voice sounded in his mind. Reward: Basic Boxing Proficiency Level 2, Permanent. He felt a subtle shift, a sense of integration. It was just a beginner's level, but it was a step up from a total novice. He was already eager for his next session, but for today he was spent. He showered and came out ready to eat. Walt was still nursing his milkshake, which the attentive staff had refilled every time it got halfway empty. He was already full. When Leo came out and invited him to eat, Walt was filled with regret. All this amazing food, and he filled up on a chocolate milkshake. Leo, however, ordered a feast. Wagyu sliders, truffle fries, a charcuterie board. He ate with gusto. As he was finishing, a woman in a sharp business suit approached their table. "Mr. Foster, my name is Ms. Hughes. I'm a manager here. How was your session today?" "It was great," Leo said, swallowing a bite of tender beef. "The coach is very professional. The food is excellent." Ms. Hughes smiled. "Our owner asked me to come thank you personally for the free promotion. Please accept these 2 complimentary membership cards as a token of our appreciation." She slid 2 black cards across the table and then politely excused herself. Leo stared at them. $20,000? After she left, Walt leaned in. "Was that because of your TikTok? They don't seem very generous. How much can those cards be worth?" Leo just shook his head. 20 grand. Full and satisfied, Leo headed back to campus. He couldn't wait to spar with Stella. There's a certain feeling of invincibility that comes with leveling up. Walt, stuffed from the unexpected feast, drove more slowly on the way back. Leo had packed up the leftover sausages, saying they were for his dog. Walt figured the dog was probably one of his roommates. Leo dozed on the way back, the intense workout leaving him pleasantly exhausted. He had Walt drop him off at the student strip. He took the sausages and went to Paige's off-campus apartment to see Moose. Walt lingered for a bit, chatting with the owner of a pretzel stand about the woman who ran the legendary Breakfast Bowl diner. A few minutes later, he saw Leo emerge from a small courtyard, a huge golden retriever trotting beside him. And next to him was another girl. Not the short-haired one or the long-haired one from the hotel, but a new one with curly hair. This kid, Walt thought, shaking his head, he knows too many girls. Paige was dressed simply in tight jeans, a black turtleneck, and a white fur collar jacket. Inside, without the jacket, Leo couldn't help but notice she was impressively developed. But one look at her goofy, innocent face, and any untoward thoughts vanished. This was a girl who had put herself in the hospital eating shrimp. Moose was probably smarter. The landlady, who had seen Paige's viral video, had made her some soup. Moose, meanwhile, was going stir-crazy indoors. When Leo arrived, the dog went wild, especially when he smelled the sausages. He devoured them in seconds, 1 bite per link. Leo clipped on the leash, and seeing Paige looking so dejected, he dragged her out for the walk too. The air on campus felt cleaner than in the city, but he was too tired to run. With a sick person in tow, a slow stroll was perfect. They walked toward the big track at Hargrove Hall. It wasn't as good as the open fields by the lake, where Moose could run free, but it was too cold and windy for that today. After 2 laps, Paige was already tired. Leo had her pose with Moose and snapped a few pictures to send to their blended family group chat as proof of life. The photos turned out great. The late afternoon light cast a warm, emotional glow, and Paige's expression was a perfect mix of pitiable and adorable. Her eyes, unburdened by either academic stress or life's hardships, had the same pure quality as Moose's. She was unusually quiet, the sore throat preventing her from her usual non-stop chatter. It was a nice change of pace. For her, the year's greatest tragedy was that the boy she liked didn't like her back. He had pulled Moose up before helping her when they'd both fallen down once. "The dog was on top of you," Leo had protested. "He weighs 80 pounds. Her brief melancholy was quickly forgotten as she started wrestling with Moose again. For her, this crush wasn't a soul-crushing heartbreak. It was more like wanting a toy someone else had. Years later, one of the photos Leo took that day would resurface online, hailed as a classic of candid, slice-of-life photography. On their walk, they ran into Jessica Monroe. She was with Grace, the American exchange professor's daughter. Leo gave her a casual wave. He saw the little blonde girl and understood. Jessica was working. They were 2 sides of the same coin. She was always working. He was always completing tasks for the system. Jessica was, in fact, getting paid to take Grace on walks and practice conversational Chinese with her. It was far more effective than the formal lessons the girl had been taking. Jessica saw Leo with the golden retriever and the girl by his side. She wasn't Stella, but she was clearly from a wealthy family, with an air of sheltered innocence. The girl was obviously in love with Leo. Her eyes never left him. A woman's sixth sense for these things was sharper than Sherlock Holmes's. She watched as the girl playfully tripped and fell onto the grass. She heard her call out in a hoarse voice, "Foster, you jerk, help me up." "Get up yourself," Leo called back. "It's your throat that's messed up, not your legs." A small smile touched Jessica's lips. She felt happy for her roommate, and a sharp pang of envy. As they walked away, Grace asked, "Lynn, are they in love?" Jessica shook her head. "Not now. I don't know about the future." In Chinese, our verb tenses require very specific context. After walking Moose and dropping Paige off, Leo figured he was due for another 0.1 centimeter growth reward. He was starting to figure out the system's patterns. Helping out with pets or kids and getting a satisfied review usually resulted in a height increase. He was officially 5 feet 9 inches now, still the shortest in the dorm, somehow. But today's reward was specific. Reward. Finger length increased by 0.1 cm. His fingers? He was a guy, not a hand model. What did he need pretty hands for? It was a little late to start piano lessons, and it wasn't like anyone could force him to practice. Under the dim campus streetlights, Leo held up his hands. They really did look elegant, slender. He kept his nails short, mostly because he had a compulsive need to clean out any dirt that got trapped underneath. Still, the reward felt useless. Longer fingers weren't going to make him a better boxer. He made a fist and was surprised to find the ache in his thumb had vanished. He pressed on the joint. No pain at all. He'd been considering changing his growth target for the day, but he had no idea how. It was like that one time a guy in another dorm asked his roommates if there were people in the world with two. Well, let's just say guys, especially virgins, didn't usually compare sizes. It was just too awkward. Readers, you are mistaken. But Leo was easygoing. An increase to his fingers was fine. Besides, Stella seemed to love playing with his hands. Every time she held his hand, she'd turn it over and over, studying it intently. It made his heart race. Paige could throw herself at him, and he wouldn't feel a thing, but one touch from Stella and his mind would start wandering. He'd heard some girls were really into guys' hands. Maybe this wasn't so useless after all. By the time he got back to the dorm, it was dark. Even Alex, the man about campus, was back, though he was clearly getting ready to go out again. Alex stood in front of the mirror, fussing with his hair. "Leo, what do you think? Side part or middle part?" Leo shrugged. "Ask Jordan. I'm not an expert on this stuff." Jordan, engrossed in a game, glanced up for a second. "Side part. Your right jaw muscle is a little bigger. A side part balances it out." Alex stared at his reflection, a pained expression on his face. He'd gotten an answer, but he wasn't happy about it. Leo and Sean burst out laughing. Remembering his other gain from the day, Leo pulled out the 2 black cards from his wallet and handed one to Sean. "What's this?" Sean asked. "From the video you posted of me boxing. The owner of the Crucible said it drove a bunch of traffic to their gym, so he gave us these. They're anonymous membership cards. 2 of them, 1 for each of us." "I'm not into boxing," Sean said, pushing the card back. "It'd be a waste on me." "You keep it, Leo." "This is the first physical reward we've gotten from our channel," Leo insisted. "It's only fair we split it." Jordan's game finished. "Let me see that." He'd gotten free samples from makeup companies before for his own TikToks. Leo passed him the card. Jordan immediately pulled up eBay on his phone. "Whoa, dude, this card is worth 10 grand. Jordan whistled. "Someone's selling one on here. Looks like they've sold for as much as 8 grand. Now they're going for 6 or 7. When Jordan said 10 grand, Sean's jaw dropped. He'd figured the card was worth 1,000, 2 at most. Even then, he wasn't going to take it. It was useless to him, and Leo could actually use it. But $10,000? That was more than his entire family made in a year. And Leo had just casually offered it to him. Sean was even more adamant now. "I can't take this, Leo. It's way too much. They gave this to you because of you. I had nothing to do with it. This isn't part of our TikTok income. You don't have to split it with me." "He's right. It's not from our TikTok revenue," Leo said calmly. "That's why we're not splitting it by percentage. There are 2 cards, so we each get 1. It's anonymous. You can do whatever you want with it." Not wanting to argue, Leo grabbed his wash basin and headed for the communal bathroom. Alex, having settled on a side part, saw Sean still hesitating. "Just take it," he said. "If you feel bad, consider a loan. Just keep a running tab. If you guys keep this up, you're going to have way more opportunities down the road." Leo's a good guy. Remember this moment the next time you two have a disagreement. Alex and Jordan weren't shocked that Leo would offer the card to Sean. It was exactly the kind of thing they expected from him. In their minds, it was just another point in Leo's favor. He could have easily kept both cards without saying a word, but he didn't. Leo Foster was a guy you could count on, a friend for life. Of course, the person most moved was Sean himself. He knew he was more materialistic than the others. If he'd quietly received that much money, He wasn't sure he'd be so generous. A heavy feeling settled in his chest, and his eyes began to sting. "I can list it on eBay for you," Sean Jordan offered. "I've sold stuff before. My seller rating is pretty good. Might get you a better price." Sean nodded, grateful. He decided he'd do what Alex suggested. Keep a record. He would only take his agreed-upon cut from the sale. The rest he'd consider a loan from Leo. Still, the sudden windfall felt like a massive weight lifting from his shoulders. When Leo returned from the bathroom, he changed his clothes and headed out with Alex. They walked with their arms slung over each other's shoulders, Alex radiating a cloud of expensive cologne. He was clearly on the prowl. "Don't you ever get tired of dates?" Leo asked, genuinely curious. "Eating on the student strip every night. There's nothing good left to try. Once you've tried every restaurant," Alex said with a grin, "you just get a new girlfriend. That way, it never gets boring." Leo just shook his head. "Easy there, buddy. I really don't want to see your name in the papers someday for a conduct violation." He had no interest in getting a new girlfriend. He hadn't even fully secured the one he had. And he definitely didn't have Alex's ironclad heart. He had a dinner date with Stella, but the student strip really did feel lacking. The thought of taking her to one of those greasy little joints felt wrong. When he saw her waiting for him, dressed in white pants, a white top, and a camel-colored coat, he knew he was right. She was too pristine for that. Leo pulled out his phone and called Lucky's, placing a takeout order. He picked up the hot food, grabbed a couple of Cokes, and led Stella across campus. They slipped through an old, darkened academic building and made their way to the top floor of the glass-walled science building, to the classroom at the very end of the hall. It was the art studio Dr. Croft had left for him, a place where they were guaranteed to be alone. The studio was spacious, filled with easels, a sofa, a massive window, and tall, heavy curtains. The most distinct feeling in a new relationship is probably nervousness. Leo was never nervous around Paige. He wasn't nervous around Jessica. He was a little nervous around Ms. Miller, maybe, but he was most nervous around Stella. Even after they'd spent a whole night just lying next to each other, his heart still hammered when he saw her. That tension was part of the joy, though. When you're 34, it's hard to find a girl who makes you nervous anymore, unless there's a cop taking your statement or her husband is standing outside the closet. A slightly flustered Leo Foster, all 5 feet 9 inches of him, had ordered his favorite comfort foods: spicy stir-fried beef, crispy corn fritters, a hearty stew with potatoes and ribs, and some simple fried rice. He'd almost ordered the Westlake beef soup, but vetoed it at the last minute, remembering its secret ingredient was an obscene amount of garlic. It was easily enough food for 4 people, but Leo had ordered a feast for 2. Love, it turned out, was great for the economy. When he was alone, a packet of instant ramen was fine. But for 2, you couldn't just make 2 packets of ramen. He dragged over a large table normally used for still life setups, which was covered with a pretty, paint-splattered floral cloth. He arranged the food, the Cokes, and lit a candle. Instant candlelight dinner. Stella looked around, curious. The fact that he could paint at all had been a small surprise. At first, she thought she was just drawn to his voice. He was a movie star handsome, just a vague, pleasant crush. But the more time they spent together, the more attractive he became, and the more she discovered he could do. It was like finding another version of herself. Her own hobbies were varied and intense: cycling, horseback riding, boxing. Her father, Richard Vance, had raised her like the son he never had. He wasn't the kind of guy whose looks you remembered instantly, but when he spoke, you couldn't forget him, and it felt like he was constantly growing. Stella even wondered if he had started changing because of her. He was always trying, always improving. He wasn't like this before, she'd heard. Just another guy in a sea of average college students. But lately, the change had been dramatic. A boy trying so hard to better himself just to be with you. Seeing those small, daily improvements was incredibly moving, and he wasn't arrogant about it. He was the same as he'd always been. From the beginning, though nervous, he'd always been confident. He never seemed to doubt their relationship. That was a confidence she lacked. She was the one constantly plagued by insecurity. Her mother, Victoria, had always worried she was the type to fall head over heels, a love brain, she'd called it, terrified she'd be swept away by some broke guy. Because of her mom's constant nagging, Stella had never even considered dating. And now, here she was, living out her mother's prophecy, completely smitten with a boy from an ordinary family. She told her mother, "He's different. He's hardworking. He's brilliant." All the classic lines of defense Victoria had warned her about. Every girl with a love brain said the same thing. They all believed their boyfriend, though poor now, was a diamond in the rough who would give them a beautiful future. Stella couldn't tell if she was just blinded by love or if she had truly found someone unique. When he'd asked her to dinner tonight, she'd expected another simple meal on the student strip. She'd seen her dorm mates on dates like that. Nothing special, just being together. She never imagined he'd bring her somewhere like this. Is this where you used to paint? Leo nodded. Dr. Croft went back home, but she asked Dean Roberts to let me keep using the studio. For now, it's all mine. My mom likes to paint, too. She has a studio, but her skill level is permanently stuck at elementary school. Her eye for art, though, is incredible. Any piece she buys ends up appreciating in value. She's a huge fan of Dr. Croft's work. Leo finished setting up and called her over to eat. Neither of them was particularly hungry. When you're with someone you're crazy about, just looking at them can feel filling. Hunger takes a back seat to other emotions. But it was dinner time, so they ate. Leo was always on his best behavior around Stella, mindful of his posture and manners. The one-day buff, social graces the system had given him once had left a lasting impression. He tried to sit up straight, maintain eye contact, and move with a sense of calm. He only ever reverted to his usual slouching, phone-scrolling self when he ate alone. Stella's etiquette, on the other hand, was completely natural. It was clear she came from a background where good manners were second nature. They didn't eat in silence, chatting about their days. Leo told her about taking Paige to the clinic, driving Dr. Croft to the airport, and even getting the membership cards from the gym. He'd mentioned it all briefly in texts, but saying it face-to-face felt different, more real. Stella thought his life sounded so full. Her days were mostly spent studying languages, reading, and attending private lessons. She wasn't clingy. She found the idea of couples who were constantly stuck together, pretending to study while really just making out, to be a waste of time. You ended up feeling guilty about the relationship and failing your classes. It wasn't easy being the heir to a self-made fortune. She'd seen few successful examples. There was the case of that famous hot sauce company whose son took over, ran it into the ground, and forced his retired mother to come back to work. A book-smart heir wasn't enough, but a party boy heir was worse. It was a difficult balance. She didn't have to face it yet, but the day was coming, unless her dad had another kid stashed away somewhere. After they finished, Stella helped him clean up, packing the trash into a bag to leave by the door. The one downside to the studio was the lack of a private bathroom. You had to use the one down the hall. Since it was late, the floor was deserted. Leo walked her to the restroom and waited by the sinks outside. The silence of the academic building, the dim lights, the mirror. It was the perfect setting for a horror movie. All that was missing was a bloody handprint appearing on the glass. But this was a campus romance, not a campus horror story. After they washed their hands under the cold tap water, Leo flicked the drops from his fingers. Stella stepped forward with a paper towel and began to dry his hands for him, her touch careful and deliberate. His hands were cold, reddened by the water. She was just supposed to be drying them, but then she noticed again how beautiful they were. The fingers were long and elegant, but with a subtle strength. They felt cool and smooth. As she held them, he gently took her hand in his and brought it to his lips for a soft kiss. Then he leaned in and kissed her forehead. At 5 feet 9 inches, he was the perfect height for her 5'7". No need to stoop. In a horror movie, a quiet, deserted place is the perfect time for something terrifying to happen. In a romance, a quiet, deserted place is the perfect time for something thrilling to happen. A rusty faucet, not quite shut off, dripped slowly into the basin. Plink, plink. In the mirror, his slender fingers tangled in her hair. Outside the bathroom, they had kissed. In the stairwell, they had kissed. At the foot of the cemetery hill, they had kissed. In the mountaintop gazebo, they had kissed. In the car in the garage, they had kissed. Years later, during his senior year, Leo would walk through campus and find that so many unremarkable places held profound memories. They were the backdrop of his youth, his first love, his Stella. The long, dim hallway, the murky mirror, the flickering light, the dripping faucet, a boy and a girl, lost in a kiss. Anyone with experience knows the secret. Don't keep shifting your head. A slight tilt to the right is the most comfortable position. If your tongues happen to meet, don't panic and flail around. A gentle touch is all it takes. The best state is when a vacuum forms in your mouths, leaving you breathless. A tip for all the readers with someone to spend New Year's Eve with. For those without, feel free to study this. It won't help. After a deep kiss, bodies naturally press closer. But the hallway was still chilly. They reluctantly separated and returned to the art studio. The studio had heating, but the large space and high ceilings meant the air never got truly warm. Still, it was better than outside. He shut the door, locking the gloomy hallway out. At night, Leo always pulled the curtains. The giant windows became one-way mirrors. You couldn't see out, but anyone outside could see imperfectly. Even though the view was just trees and there were no buildings opposite, The inky blackness felt unsettling. When he was here with Dr. Croft, it was just a man and a woman in a room, but there was never a strange atmosphere. With Stella, however, his mind was filled with all sorts of inappropriate thoughts. They closed the curtains together, each taking a side and meeting in the middle. When they met, Leo repeated the steps from the hallway sink, only this time with more confidence. He could press her against the window, cushioned by the heavy drapes, inside a locked room. There was no fear of someone emerging from a stall or walking down the hall. He tilted his head, one hand cradling the back of hers, the other. Stella wasn't wearing much. Just a white cashmere sweater over a soft, light blue camisole. The material of the camisole felt like cashmere too, softer than skin, without the thick padding of a normal bra. Outside, the wind howled, shaking the trees. If someone were standing below, they would see the curtains trembling in unison with the branches. Perhaps a new campus legend would be born. They moved from the window to the sofa. Time seemed to slow, becoming thick and syrupy. The boy was eager, passionate. He was like a diligent quality inspector, his slender hands carefully examining every inch. The white sweater, the light blue camisole. Soft, cashmere, wrinkle-resistant. He didn't cross the line. He wasn't sure if her period was over. And besides, even in the heat of the moment, the setting felt not quite right. He managed to restrain himself. But seeing the usually composed, cool, beautiful Stella lying on the sofa, her eyes glistening and one sock half off, gave him an immense sense of accomplishment. He wanted to paint it. In that moment, he felt a deep connection with all the great, perverted artists of history. In the midst of such a tender scene, he went to his easel. Stella lay there for a while, watching in disbelief as he actually began to paint. His long fingers held the brush with intense focus. She knew he was painting her, but she felt a pang of jealousy toward the girl on the canvas, who had stolen all his attention. She closed her eyes. A tear escaped from the corner. Humans cry from sadness, but they also cry from extreme pleasure. Her face felt hot. She pushed herself up and went to the restroom down the hall to compose herself. The cold air helped. When she returned, she felt much calmer. She watched him work. He was so absorbed, he hadn't even noticed she'd left and come back. Just as she was feeling composed, she watched his long fingers grip the brush, tracing the lines of the girl's face and body on the canvas. It felt like he was repeating their earlier actions, stroke by stroke. An invisible hand was caressing every part of her, and she felt her skin flush, her body grow warm. She was watching someone paint, and her body was trembling. Leo was completely in the zone. He finally understood what Dr. Croft meant about wishing she had more hands. The best painter in the world had to be a spider demon. When inspiration struck, there was never enough time. The image in his mind was so vivid, so real, and he needed to get it onto the canvas to capture every lifelike detail. He felt he didn't have enough hands, couldn't paint fast enough. At that moment, he could have broken his hand and not even felt the pain. His focus was so absolute. He felt like he had finally achieved a true mastery of portraiture. It was effortless, as if his brushstrokes were bringing the image to life. The delicate texture, the feel of real skin. He painted her eyes, loving the way they swam with tears of pleasure, joy, and affection. In that instant, he felt, for the first time, that Stella truly loved him. She came up behind him, wanting to press against him, but he gently pushed her away. "Don't, I'm almost done." Stella froze. It was the first time anyone had ever pushed her away. But Leo genuinely couldn't be bothered with the real Stella right now. The painting was so close to being finished, and he had to capture that essential spirit, that fleeting feeling. It wouldn't just materialize on its own. He had to put it there with his brush. He was meticulously detailing the body of the girl on the sofa. Stella walked around and sat on the chair in front of him. She took one of his free hands and pressed it against her own body. "This way," she whispered, "it will be more accurate, don't you think?" The painting did not get finished. The chair in the art studio, however, nearly fell apart. They walked back to the dorms slowly, hand in hand. Leo found himself walking her all the way to the entrance of the women's residence hall, finally understanding why he'd always stopped at the fountain before. Some things had changed, and there was no going back. Being reserved was a sign of liking someone. Not being reserved was a sign of liking them more. In the throes of a new romance, you wanted to be physically attached at all times. Just holding her hand filled him with a simple, profound joy. You could drop him in a horror movie where he had to walk all night to survive, and he wouldn't be scared. He'd think, "You mean I get to hold her hand and walk forever? Best deal ever." He could kiss her on the side of the road with people watching and feel no shame. Hormones trumped embarrassment. It was a kind of skin hunger, a craving for more touch, more kisses, more closeness. The massive, motion-activated floodlights at the dorm entrance were a harsh dose of reality, jolting them back to their senses. Leo had brought a large scarf for Stella, but they'd left it back in the studio. It had certainly come in handy. Stella looked incredible wrapped in nothing but a scarf. Her dedicated workouts had given her a strong, beautiful figure, perfectly proportioned, with no excess fat. It was the kind of physique both artists and coroners would obsess over. It was textbook perfect. Leo thought even her shoulders were beautiful. He could spend hours just admiring her shoulders. The smooth curve, the elegant line of her neck, the hollow at its base. She was just as beautiful with her clothes on. The dorm supervisor, however, was not. A woman with a face weathered by years of dealing with students stood at the iron gate, banging a stick against it. Closing up. Let's go. Leo and Stella exchanged a look. So this is what it felt like to be shooed away. Stella, blushing slightly, turned and hurried inside. Leo had no choice but to head back to his own dorm. He finally understood why his neighbor had taken out high-interest loans just to rent an apartment off campus. At the time, he'd laughed at the guy's foolishness. He was starting to understand the typical progression of human maturity: mock others, understand others, become others, and finally surpass others. He walked back, the night air cold, but his heart was warm. As he crossed the large bridge on campus, the wind picked up, and he pulled his coat tighter. Suddenly, a figure came sprinting toward him from the other direction. The iconic long hair, the colorful scarf. He didn't even need to see her face to know who it was. Jessica Monroe was flying across the bridge. She was often in this state, running back late. The dorm supervisor would usually let her in, but not without a lecture, especially since she was always dressed to the nines. Jessica, being more mature than most, often brought the supervisor little gifts, snacks, and trinkets. So while the woman grumbled, it was more like an aunt nagging her niece. Still, Jessica preferred to avoid the well-intentioned but unnecessary lectures, hence the frantic sprints back to the dorm. She didn't expect to run into Leo, who was strolling back at a leisurely pace. Dressed in a black coat and a simple scarf, it was obvious he'd just dropped Stella off. The bridge was pedestrian-only, a beautiful structure with red, fan-shaped suspension cables that had supposedly won some design award. It was a staple in the university's promotional videos. Below, the river flowed swiftly. The wind was strong. The short-haired boy in the black coat, khaki pants, and leather sneakers was handsome in the lamplight. Seeing him walk toward her felt like a scene from a manga she'd once read. Jessica suddenly felt disheveled and clumsy. It was strange. She always seemed to bump into him when she was rushing somewhere. From Leo's perspective, the scene was equally striking. Jessica's colorful scarf was a bit worn, but large, like a cloak. Her long hair flew behind her. She wore tight black leggings and what looked like leather shorts over them, her top also black. The vibrant scarf was a splash of color against the dark outfit. Her makeup was dramatic, with a hint of red eyeshadow. Running across the bridge, with the wind whipping around her, she looked like a character straight out of a comic book. No matter how much people gossiped about her, there was a reason she'd held the title of Campus Belle of the English department for 4 years. There was something undeniably beautiful about her wild, energetic spirit. She always radiated a positive energy that was infectious. They knew each other well enough to exchange a greeting. Leo nodded. Jessica nodded back. They passed each other without stopping, a blur of motion and a gust of wind. The air smelled faintly of jasmine and camellia before the wind swept it away. Just then, the mechanical voice sounded in Leo's head. Congratulations, host, for your progress with the silver-tier single woman, Jessica Monroe, who possesses limitless potential. A small achievement. Favorability has reached 81. Please continue your efforts and strive for greater heights. Leo was baffled. What was the trigger mechanism here? They just passed each other. He hadn't done anything. Maybe he'd been smiling, but that was because he was high on romance. His eyebrows were probably halfway up his forehead. A random favorability boost. It almost made him nervous. Maybe Jessica had a good day and made a lot of money. It was like when you're in a bad mood, you want to kick a stray dog, but when you're in a good mood, you want to feed a stray cat. Leo was in a great mood. He even thought Jessica looked prettier than usual. He walked quickly back to the men's dorm. The doors closed a little later here, a thoughtful consideration for guys who had to walk their girlfriends back. The supervisor here was also a woman, but she was younger and had a kinder smile than her counterpart at the girls' dorm. Any packages for me? Leo asked as he entered. Yes, there is, she said warmly. I put it aside for you. Looks like an international one. She remembered this kid. Good looking. She'd seen him on TikTok. Great singer. It was a shame he'd stopped posting songs. He should enter a competition or something. Leo had received international packages from Stella before, but she was in the country now. Who else would be sending him something from abroad? It couldn't be his electric razor taking a world tour. He took the large box and saw the Japanese characters on the label. He knew instantly who it was from. Mr. Mikami. The box was huge and heavy. The shipping cost must have been insane. He wondered what on earth the team master had sent him. Back in the dorm, he opened it. Inside the big box was a smaller box, and inside that, another, each layer packed with foam and bubble wrap. Finally, he pulled out a cloth bag. Inside was a bronze brazier. Leo suddenly remembered that with his TikTok notifications turned off, he'd been missing messages. Mr. Mikami had been trying to contact him there. He opened the app. Sure enough, there was a long message. The auto-translation explained that since Leo had won the iron kettle at the competition, Mr. Mikami was sending him the matching brazier. It was a beautiful piece, ancient and rustic. The surface was textured with uneven, worm-like patterns, a decorative band around the top, and it stood on 3 small feet with 2 handles on the sides. It was an old iron brazier, meant for burning charcoal. As he pulled it out, his roommates gathered around, curious. Unboxing was always a spectator sport. Sean even started filming. Besides the brazier, there were long, cylindrical objects, heavy to the touch, with a chrysanthemum pattern on one end. After handling them for a second, Leo's hands were black. He realized it was charcoal. Mr. Mikami had thoughtfully included a whole box of it, complete with instructions. Alex had returned from his date, now smelling of an additional layer of perfume. He saw the box. Whoa, that looks like a grill, Jordan commented. Same difference, Sean said. If you can boil tea on it, you can grill meat on it. Too bad we don't have any meat. How about hot dogs? Hearing them, Leo's stomach rumbled. He'd been so focused on Stella during dinner, he'd barely registered what he ate. He was emotionally satisfied, but physically starving. Should we grill some hot dogs? Leo suggested. Yeah, how about other snacks we can grill, too? Sean said, already closing the door. Alex cracked open the window. Leo placed the brazier on the desk by the window. Sean produced a pack of cocktail weenies. Jordan found some imitation crab sticks, and Alex supplied the beer. After a bit of fiddling, Jordan managed to get the charcoal lit. Sean washed the top of the brazier, which seemed to be made of pure cast iron. It actually worked. Sean peeled the weenies, speared them on disposable chopsticks, and scored them with a knife. Jordan took over as grill master, and soon the room filled with a delicious aroma. He even found some leftover barbecue seasoning to sprinkle on top. The ingredients were cheap, the conditions were primitive, but for some reason, it smelled incredible. Paired with a beer, no fridge needed, just set on the windowsill for a few minutes. It was pure bliss. The dorm room was cluttered, but the 4 of them huddled around the small brazier, grilling meatless chicken sausages and crabless crab sticks, drinking beer that probably contained some wheat, were overcome with a profound sense of happiness. Sean set up his camera by the door and took a group photo. While eating, Leo replied to the team master on TikTok. Leo, the brazier arrived. Thank you. Mr. Mikami, despite the hour difference, replied almost instantly. Mr. Mikami, have you used it, Funkoin? How do you find it? Leo looked at the cocktail weenies and crab sticks sizzling on the ancient artifact. Leo, I have. The heat is very even and fast. It is a brazier that brings happiness. Mr. Mikami, pensive emoji. Mr. Mikami, I have inexplicably reached a new level of enlightenment from your words, Funkoin, to think that one can derive happiness from tea. I have never felt such a thing. That is why I lost. Mr. Mikami, this Meiji-era brazier has crossed the ocean to find you. It has finally returned to its true master. Leo, stop spacing out. Your hot dog is burning. Alex yelled. Right. When Leo mentioned that the brazier was from the Meiji era, the mood shifted. Wait, so it's an antique? Alex said. Jordan was speechless. This was taking things to a new level. Jordan picked up one of the unused charcoal sticks, examining the chrysanthemum emblem. This charcoal is probably worth 50 times more than the hot dogs we're eating. Well, we've already started, Leo said. Can't waste it now. Eat up. The tiny dorm room, even with the window open, was warm and hazy. Huddled around the small fire, they ate what was probably the best cocktail weenie they would ever taste in their lives. It was an experience that could never be replicated. Years later, when Alex was a high-ranking official, he would never again taste a hot dog so delicious. After they finished, Sean waited for the brazier to cool completely, then painstakingly cleaned the sausage residue from its surface in the middle of the night. It had survived a journey from Japan. He wasn't about to let it be ruined by their late-night snack. The others were already asleep, but his meticulous nature wouldn't let him rest until it was done. After washing it, Sean finally felt at ease. He crawled into bed. He'd used the same thin comforter for 4 years, without a mattress pad underneath. It got cold in the winter. Alex and Leo had both added thick pads to their beds when the weather turned, but Jordan was a human furnace and didn't need one. Sean was always a bit cold, but he'd just tough it out. Tonight, however, the grilled food and beer had left him feeling warm, and he didn't feel the chill. The lights were out, but he couldn't sleep. He was too excited. Jordan had told him someone had made an offer on the gym membership card. With the economy being what it was, they were negotiating the price, but it looked like they could get around 75% of its value. That was still over $7,000. So many times, he'd regretted coming to college. He never dared to think about it too deeply, but a part of him wondered if his insistence on getting an education was what had made his mother sick. His parents were uneducated and had never left their village before they went out to find work to pay for his tuition. Maybe he should have just skipped college and started earning money sooner. Then they wouldn't have had to work so hard. He remembered his childhood friend, Dylan. In middle school, they'd both buy meals from the cafeteria. A dish cost 50 cents, $1.50 a day. But Dylan's father would berate him in front of everyone. "You have pickled vegetables from home. Why are you spending money? You don't know how to be frugal." Dylan loved computers, and his dad would beat him every time he saw him near one. But now, Sean knew everyone used computers. They were essential. His own father was better. He valued Sean's pride. As long as Sean said something was for his studies, his dad would buy it. Sometimes he'd grumble about the cost, but he'd hold his tongue and just say he'd work a little harder. But that was the thing about love. Even from your own father, when sacrifice was too great, it became a heavy burden. And that was before factoring in his sick mother. If she had eaten well, rested properly, lived like the other women in the village, she might not have gotten so ill. It was the exhaustion, the poor conditions. He was filled with regret, but he couldn't say it out loud. Not after all this time. His greatest fear was that his parents' sacrifices would be for nothing, that he would end up with nothing to show for it. But now he felt a sense of peace. If he hadn't gone to college, he never would have met these roommates. His world would have remained small. He might have earned more money, or maybe not, but he would have always felt like something was missing. Tonight, lying in the dark, he knew he didn't regret it, and his parents wouldn't either. This was the future they had all wanted, a chance to change their fate. The night was quiet, save for the chorus of snores from Jordan, Alex, and Leo. It wasn't peaceful, but it was familiar. Sean pulled the comforter over his shoulders, tucked his hands inside, and closed his eyes. The next morning, Leo woke up at his usual 5:45 a.m. The beer had helped him sleep soundly. He'd been out the moment his head hit the pillow. He wanted to probe a drunk Alex for some private information. Like, how did he manage to restrain himself all the time? Was there something wrong with him? Leo was having trouble controlling his own urges. Was it pure ambition that kept Alex in check? That was some serious dedication. But he'd fallen asleep before he got the chance. He felt rested, but also a little depleted. Dating was physically taxing. He felt like he wasn't strong enough. He needed to work out more. He got up, went through his morning trifecta: honey water, bathroom, wash up, and headed downstairs for his run. As he was warming up on the track, he felt a pair of eyes on him. He looked up and saw the dorm supervisor standing at the entrance to her office, toothbrush in hand, staring at him with a strange smile. It was unsettling. "Morning, ma'am," he called out. The way she was looking at him was the same way they had all looked at the grilling hot dogs last night. He quickly finished his stretches and started running off campus. He headed toward the spot where Professor Reed did her morning exercises. Seeing her was a relief. She was also smiling at him, but her gaze was normal, not the laser beam intensity of the dorm supervisor. She looked particularly energetic today, more so than when Dr. Croft had been visiting. Her fluffy white hair was neatly styled, and her tracksuit was crisp and clean. She stood tall and straight, like a 69-year-old Olympian. "Good morning, Professor." He called her yesterday to let her know Dr. Croft had made it to the airport safely, but it was good to follow up in person. "Thank you for your help yesterday, Leo." Genevieve said she arrived in New York safely, but the child is already flying overseas again today. I don't know how her body can take it. Hearing Dr. Croft, a woman in her 40s, referred to as the child, made Leo wonder what that made him, at 21. The grandson, "I'm sure she'll be fine. It seems like even though she's not well, she has a lot of experience managing her health." Professor Reed waved a hand dismissively. "It's out of my hands. My own descendants are abroad, and I don't worry about them. The grandkids say they're not getting married, not having kids. I don't meddle. If I tried to control everything, I'd have worried myself to death by now. You can't use old maps to navigate new roads. She was a firm believer in not interfering, unless it was happening right under her nose. With Genevieve gone, she could finally relax. Last night was the best sleep she'd had in weeks. Who knew a woman pushing 70 would be losing sleep like a college student worrying about her roommate disappearing in the middle of the night? Oh, by the way, she added, Genevieve said she wants to come to New York after she gets back. I was planning on making a trip myself. We could go together. Probably next week. Really? He'd never been to New York in his entire life. The thought was thrilling. Could we see Times Square? Of course, she laughed, adjusting her glasses. You can stay in my apartment. It's not far from there. The trees on campus were lush, the lines on the basketball court freshly painted. The backboard were pristine, the nets intact. The university was good about maintenance, repainting, and replacing things every semester. Some might nitpick that the campus lacked accessibility ramps, but then again, there were no students or faculty who needed them. Building them would be performative, not practical. These were details Leo was only just beginning to appreciate. It was only after entering the real world that he would truly understand how rare it was to find an institution or a company so dedicated to the small things, so invested in its people's growth, and so relentlessly ambitious. He finished his warm-up with Professor Reed, and after a bit more small talk, he started his run. He decided this was a good new routine. He could check in with her in the morning, touch base about his work as her assistant. He was still receiving a stipend for it, which was enough to cover his daily expenses, if he wasn't dating, that is. Professor Reed seemed to enjoy it too. It was nice to have someone to chat with during her exercises, and the vibrant energy of a young person was a pleasant way to start the day. Leo ran toward the main athletic field. He'd expected to be the only one there at this hour, but he saw another figure already circling the track. Who was this diligent, ambitious person? Did they have a system too? As he got closer, he realized it was his girlfriend. It was Stella. He'd told her he was changing his running route, but he hadn't asked her to join him, knowing that women were often weaker and uncomfortable during certain times of the month. He wasn't exactly sure which days those were. It seemed that once a guy got a girlfriend, he suddenly became an expert on menstrual cycles. You can't teach a man, but a relationship will. Professor Reed appreciated Leo's youthful discipline. Leo, seeing Stella running, was filled with something closer to awe. She had all the money in the world, and yet she was still here, pushing herself. She was healthy, fit, hardworking, smart, and beautiful. Some lucky bastard was going to have it all. He grinned. He slowed his pace, waiting for her to loop around, then fell in a step beside her. The main track was built in a recessed basin, so the high stadium seats shielded it from the wind. The air was cold, but after a few minutes of running, your body warmed up. The hardest part was always just getting out of bed. When Stella saw him, she smiled. She'd pulled her hair back into a ponytail, but a few loose strands escaped at her temples and the nape of her neck, adding a touch of adorable messiness to her otherwise serious demeanor. Stella did everything with an intense focus, even running. She projected an aura of cool detachment. But when she saw Leo, her face lit up, and she slowed her pace to match his. You're here even earlier than I am. It's a bit of a walk from the girls' dorm, isn't it? Yeah, but I woke up and couldn't go back to sleep. The truth was, she hadn't worked out in a few days, and her body felt sluggish. A run sounded good. Also, Jessica was already up. Half the reason Stella was here so early was that her roommate had woken her up. Jessica had been quiet, but not quiet enough. By the time Stella was heading out for a run, Jessica was already gone. Stella had just thrown on some sunscreen and tied up her hair. Jessica had put on a full face of makeup. It was an astonishing level of dedication. Not that Stella was judging. Everyone lived differently. Before, she might have thought Jessica was wasting her time, that she should be focused on her studies. But lately, since she'd started dating Leo, she realized her perspective had been too narrow. Life didn't always follow a plan. Sometimes, unexpected things happened that you couldn't control. Like her, showing up at the track at the crack of dawn, not just to run, but to wait for him, to give him a little surprise, to see the delighted smile spread across his face when he saw her. And he had. The joy in his expression was so genuine that even the annoying stray hairs tickling her face didn't bother her anymore. They ran side by side, not touching. The feeling was good. Stella enjoyed their moments of intimacy, but she didn't want their entire relationship to be defined by them. Passion was intoxicating, but it felt like she wasn't herself, just an animal driven by hormones. She was addicted to it, but also afraid of it. This, running together side by side, felt relaxed and easy. Leo, of course, loved it too, but he didn't quite grasp the distinction. If you like someone, you naturally wanted to be closer to them. He didn't understand Stella's hesitation. After 2 laps, they slowed to a walk. The mechanical voice chimed in his head. Congratulations, host, for your excellent progress with a platinum tier heiress, Stella Vance. Favorability has reached 87. Please continue your efforts and strive for greater heights. He turned to look at her. She wasn't smiling, but her eyes were bright as she looked back at him. Suddenly, he was nostalgic for the lakeside gazebo. He wanted to pull her onto his lap and kiss her until she was breathless. I have to go home today. It's Saturday, she said as they finished their cool-down walk. Leo hadn't even realized what day it was, but he instantly understood the implication. Should I meet you at Clearwater Cove tonight? Can you get out? Yes. The wind caught her quiet word and swirled it away with the fallen leaves. Since Stella was going home for the day, they parted ways after a quick breakfast on the student strip. Leo, feeling generous, bought a feast of fresh donuts, coffee, and apple fritters to bring back for his roommates. The food was mainly a bribe for Alex. When he got back to the room, Sean was already at his computer working. Jordan and Alex were still in bed, Jordan playing a game on his phone and Alex scrolling through the news. It was a slightly incongruous scene. Alex had a daily habit of catching up on current events, financial news, legal matters, and international politics, topics the rest of them never touched, unless it was celebrity gossip. It was one of the reasons Leo used to think Alex was phony. When you don't understand why someone does something, it's easy to judge them. If everyone else is eating slop, the person eating a proper meal is the weird one. Now, as a senior staring down graduation, he got it. Without that knowledge, you entered the world blind. You didn't know your major. You didn't know the world. For the sake of the still warm donuts, Alex and Jordan finally crawled out of their warm beds. While they ate, Leo casually mentioned he was going to visit Professor Hoffman that afternoon and wouldn't be back for the night. The not coming back part was the key, and though he didn't really need to report his whereabouts, he felt a strange guilt about leaving them behind. His roommates just nodded calmly. They understood. The only question was whether Leo had what it took. For now, he was still a virgin. Leo went to the bathroom and splashed his face with icy water, trying to calm his nerves. He changed his clothes, dawdled, and waited until Alex was finished before casually suggesting they walk out together. The last few times had been impulsive, but they hadn't resulted in him losing his virginity. Tonight he was determined. He decided he needed to consult an expert. Alex, despite his claims of celibacy, surely had some experience. Alex had a slight headache. They'd been drinking too much lately. As a senior, he was supposed to be setting an example, not getting drunk. The cold wind wasn't helping. I didn't say anything stupid last night, did I? He asked cautiously. No, I fell asleep early, Leo said. He had hemmed and hawed all the way out of the dorm complex, still unable to ask his question. Then, Alex stopped and pulled 2 small boxes out of his backpack. Leo's face instantly flushed. He took them and quickly stuffed them into his own bag. One was a box of Trojan bearskins, the other Durex Prolong. They're FDA-approved contraceptives, Alex said, deadpan. What are you so nervous about? Right, Leo muttered. You're not nervous? Then why didn't you give them to me in the dorm? Why wait until we were out here in the open with no witnesses? Thanks, Alex. How much do I owe you? Don't worry about it. It's only a few bucks. You gave me that tea at cost, and I've seen how much it sells for online. Consider us even. Leo was impressed. Alex really did think of everything. So, Leo finally asked, now that he had the goods, have you really? Never? You don't feel any urges? I used to be really into this one girl, Alex began, his voice distant. I took a red-eye flight just to see her, arrived in her city in the middle of the night. She never showed up. I spent about $1,000 on her, buying her gifts. She told me she was in the police academy. Later, I found out that was probably a lie. I found her on another social media platform. I think it was her. There were wedding photos. She was probably already married, but I didn't know that then. I wasn't thinking about my future or my studies. All I could think about was her. Leo was stunned. This was some serious gossip. He'd only ever known Alex as the guy who had everything under control. He'd been catfished. It was completely out of character. How old were you? High school. You had $1,000 in spending money in high school. Leo was floored. He'd been lucky to get $20. Alex shot him an annoyed look. Is that the point? Anyway, he continued, after that, I find it hard to be truly intimate with a girl unless I'm ready to spend the rest of my life with her. And my dad threatening to break my legs was also a factor. But mostly, I just haven't found anyone I like that much again. I haven't felt that same reckless, all-in feeling. But, every cloud has a silver lining. Now we're roommates, and that's pretty great. They reached the academic quad and went their separate ways. Alex felt he was getting sentimental in his old age, spilling his guts after a few beers. Leo, however, felt like he'd just leveled up his friendship with Alex. He now knew one of his roommates' most embarrassing secrets. As Alex walked toward Hargrove Hall, he glanced at his phone. His lock screen was a new motivational quote every day. Today's read: share a past embarrassment with a trusted friend. Your bond will deepen. Leo walked toward the building where he usually studied. He sent a message to Professor Hoffman, asking if he and his wife were free for a visit that afternoon. He needed to thank Judge Cole for the tea he'd used in the competition, and he figured asking for the professor's advice was the best way to go about it. Professor Hoffman was direct, funny, and always willing to help. The reply was almost immediate. Prof. Hoffman, sure. It's the weekend, Penelope's home. I'll make my specialty. I'll ask the judge if he wants to come over for some fishing. We can hang out in the yard, drink tea, kill some time. Leo, sounds great. I'll be there this afternoon. Leo already had a plan. He'd bring some of the Summit of Snows tea from Mr. Mikami for both the professor and the judge. He could repackage it. You didn't give a whole brick of tea like that as a gift anyway, just enough for a taste. He measured out 3 servings for each of them, placing each portion into a small, turquoise-colored ceramic canister, and arranged them in a nice gift box. It looked very presentable. Wendy Lou was already in the classroom, her desk piled high with books. The exam was in 2 months. This was the most critical period for studying. A lot of people prepped for the GRE for a year, only to burn out and give up in the final stretch. Maybe that was part of the test itself. If you couldn't handle the pressure, you weren't cut out for grad school. She'd been studying for an hour and was already feeling tired. It was Saturday, so her usual study buddy, Colin, wasn't here. She was alone. The sun was shining outside, but the classroom was cold. Her routine was to tackle the hardest material in the morning when her mind was sharpest. In the afternoon, she'd either continue studying or take a break to work out or hang out with her roommates. She didn't want to become a complete hermit, but for the past month, her morning sessions had bled into all-day marathons. The closer the exam got, the less effective her long hours felt. She was putting in more time, but getting less out of it, and the anxiety was starting to creep in. Around this time, every day, she would start glancing at the door. It was when the cool, mysterious guy would arrive to study. At first, she thought he was just there to mess around, either to hit on girls or take aesthetic photos for his social media. She never thought he was a serious student, but she'd been wrong. He came every day and genuinely studied, and he radiated an unshakable confidence. After she found his TikTok, she realized he was exceptional in every way. His life was disciplined. Running, studying, library. He was almost always on campus. The few times he disappeared, his TikTok would reveal where he'd gone. Once he was off filming a movie, playing a pretty significant role. Another time, he was at an international tea ceremony competition, where he'd beaten a Japanese master. He was full of surprises. She'd never met anyone so impressive. And yet, here he was every day, in the same quiet study room. It was strangely motivating. When she felt tired or wanted to give up, she'd see him walk in, and it would give her the strength to keep going. If someone that brilliant was still working so hard, what right did she have to quit? Today, she was especially looking forward to his arrival. Yesterday, she'd seen his viral TikTok of him learning to walk with an orange scarf, and she'd suddenly, finally, gotten it. He was handsome. Before, he was just a familiar face, a study room fixture. But the orange scarf brought out something in him. The shot of him in the library, wrapped in that bright color, reading a book, it was timelessly beautiful. It made her feel like the hard work was all worth it. She used to hate winter. Her feet would go numb after sitting for a few minutes. But that one image had changed everything. Good-looking guys were definitely at their best in the winter. The layers, the scarves, the coats, it was like a fashion show. Just as she was thinking this, he appeared in the doorway. He was wearing a light gray sweater, a white puffer vest with a black leather collar, and dark brown pants. He looked fresh, handsome, and approachable. It was like seeing her celebrity crush in real life, but without the distance. The moment Leo stepped into the classroom, the mechanical voice sounded. Congratulations, host, for your progress with the silver tier single woman, Wendy Lou. A small achievement. Favorability has reached 72. Please continue your efforts and strive for greater heights. Hearing the voice, Leo instinctively stepped back out of the room. Was this doorway magical? Last he checked, her favorability was 69, better than average, but not quite in the friend zone. He decided to test his theory. He walked back in. Congratulations, host, for your progress with the silver tier single woman, Wendy Lou. A small achievement. Favorability has reached 73. Please continue your efforts and strive for greater heights. Another point. What if he just kept walking in and out? No, that would be weird. 3 times was the charm, and he'd already pushed it. From Wendy's perspective, he was just as handsome as she remembered. He walked in, looked around with a slightly dazed expression, walked out, and then came back in. It was adorable. The only other person in the room was Wendy, so Leo gave her a nod and went to his usual spot by the window. The room was chilly, but the sunlight streaming in was warm. He set out his books, his water bottle, and his notebook, put his phone away, and prepared to study. Getting into his routine helped him focus. Just then, the grad school NPC moved toward him. She was holding a bottle of date-flavored yogurt. He tried it once and loved it. Ever since the system had assigned him a task to drink more yogurt to combat depression, he'd become something of a connoisseur. When he was wearing pink, fingerless gloves, she held out the yogurt with both hands. She debated what to call him. Leo felt too informal. Classmate felt too distant. Finally, she settled on what Colin called him. "Good morning, Leo," she said tentatively. "Can I ask you a question? The exam is in 2 months, and I've been studying more, but I feel like I'm being less efficient. I see that your study sessions are shorter, but seem much more structured. Do you have any study methods you could share?" "I have a system," he thought, "but you wouldn't believe me." However, he had been thinking about this. The Pomodoro technique he'd read about yesterday was basically a self-imposed system. It forced you to break your time into focused, single-task intervals, just like his missions. The key was to have a plan and a reward mechanism. If you set that up, you could essentially build your own productivity system. He couldn't tell her about the trophy husband system, but he could teach her how to make her own. He explained his ideas. Wendy, who had been standing, pulled over a chair and started taking notes. Pomodoro technique. 25 minutes. Reward system. In that moment, she felt incredibly lucky. His voice was so pleasant, right beside her. She'd heard the Pomodoro technique, but had never really understood it. Framing it as a game, with a system and a dashboard, made it seem not only doable, but fun. It was a revelation. Her parents had always told her to befriend people who were smarter than her, that even the little things they let slip could be life-changing. It was true. As Leo finished his explanation, the voice sounded in his head again. "Congratulations, host, for your progress with the Silver Tier Single Woman, Wendy Liu. A small achievement. Favorability has reached 75. The target has been upgraded to a loyal fan. She will defend your words and actions. If needed, she will fight your battles. As your achievements grow, so will her loyalty. Please continue your efforts and strive for greater heights." When he stood up, put her chair back, and tucked her notebook away. "Thank you so much for sharing, Leo. That was really interesting and well explained. You're very confident. I feel like I really get it now. I'm going to go back to studying." Leo gave her a nonchalant wave, but inside he was beaming. He was rarely complimented for being interesting, articulate, or confident. It felt good. Giving was truly a joy in itself. The cool classroom was surprisingly conducive to studying. A warm, cozy room just made you want to scroll through your phone or take a nap. The brain, it seemed, functioned better at a slightly lower temperature. Leo began his work. He still didn't fully grasp the ultimate meaning of education, but he knew that the process itself was slowly dispelling his sense of aimlessness. The daily intake of new knowledge made him feel like he was growing, even if just a little bit each day. The time passed quickly. He activated his time dilation buff, breaking his study session into focused 25-minute chunks. The classroom was quiet, his phone on silent. Joke of the day, a guy sneaks into the study hall to cram for finals, phone on silent. After a few hours, he checks it and finds 18 missed calls and 13 texts. Turns out, the exam was that morning, and no one could find him. Fortunately, Leo had no exams. He studied for an hour, completing his daily task, then grabbed the yogurt Winnie had given him and headed for the library. He liked the rhythm of his life now. Even with plans for the afternoon, he could still get his morning tasks done without feeling rushed. As he was walking, the system's voice chimed. "Host has diligently completed the study task and set a positive example for others. Reward, buff, aura of righteousness one day. This buff will imbue you with an air of unimpeachable integrity. Even if you commit a misdeed, law enforcement will be unlikely to suspect you, unless they find concrete evidence." Leo sighed. "Great, now I'm on the fast track to becoming a true crime podcast subject." This wasn't a romance novel where a lack of suspicion equaled innocence. The system had a seriously inflated opinion of his criminal potential. With an integrity score of 8, what was the worst he could do? He still felt guilty about letting the air out of his teacher's bike tires in middle school. He pulled up his stats page. Yep, integrity was still at 8. Give or take some fluctuations. He noticed it tended to drop whenever he interacted with Ms. Miller. What did the system think he was going to do? Being a good person was exhausting. Every little transgression weighed on you. Bad guys had it easy. They did one decent thing, and everyone called him a hero. He realized he hadn't seen Miss Miller in a few days. He sent a quick text to her son, Cody, asking how he was doing. With the weather getting colder, he wondered if the brace on the kid's back was uncomfortable. He also realized he wouldn't be able to walk Moose that afternoon. So, on his way to the library, he swung by Paige's off-campus apartment to pick up the dog. He grabbed a breakfast burrito and a sausage from a street vendor. The burrito for him, the sausage for Moose. Then, with Moose in tow, he started the long walk to the library. Moose looked particularly dapper today in a little black vest Paige had put on him. The stark black contrasted nicely with his golden fur, making him look more majestic and less like a fuzzy potato. He was thrilled to see Leo. In his dog brain, Leo was the magical being who brought treats and fun walks. The vest was a bit tight around his belly, and for the first few minutes, Moose waddled with his legs splayed, like he was having a flare-up of some unfortunate canine condition. Leo adjusted it for him. The dog was seriously heavy. The vest even had a pink lining, which was very on-brand for Paige. Leo also spotted a matching set of pink earmuffs hanging by the door, clearly an ill-conceived purchase, given that a dog's ears are on the top of its head. They ran into a wave of students just getting out of computer lab class. Everyone wanted to pet the handsome dog. Moose, a campus veteran, was used to the attention. He was picky, though. He only deigned to be petted by girls, and even then, only generously endowed ones. It was probably because they reminded him of his owner, Paige. He nearly followed one such girl down the street before Leo tugged him back. A few people took pictures of Leo as he walked by. He used to feel stiff and awkward when that happened, but now he was used to it. He kept his expression neutral. Sean had taught him that smiling or talking could create unflattering angles. An idle's burden, he supposed. The path to the library was less crowded. Dogs weren't allowed inside, so Leo planned to ask the security guard at the entrance to watch him. Ever since befriending Mr. Roberts at the faculty housing, Leo had made an effort to be friendly with all the campus guards. A simple nod or a quick chat could make life a lot easier. The guard booth here was in a strange spot, along a deserted stretch of path by the lake. It seemed its main purpose was to deter potential jumpers. Before Leo could even ask, two students, a couple, overheard and eagerly volunteered to watch Moose. They even produced a bag of treats as a qualification. Leo checked their student IDs, took a photo, and handed over the leash, telling the guard he'd appreciate it if he kept an eye on them. "I'll just be an hour," he told Moose, who was already happily munching on a treat, and wagged his tail in a dismissive goodbye. Inside, Leo wondered if he should find a book on fishing to prepare for his visit with the judge. A little last-minute cramming? It felt too calculating. As Alex had said, he needed to be strategically relaxed but tactically prepared. This was just a social call, not an interrogation. He shouldn't let it disrupt his own routine. He wandered away from the new releases and toward the biographies. He was about to pull out a book with an interesting cover when he saw a black cord-like thing behind it. It moved. A rat's tail? Startled, he yanked the book hard. The tightly packed shelf gave way, and an entire row of books cascaded to the floor with a loud crash. At the same time, a fat rat scurried out from behind the shelf and vanished. Across the aisle stood a tall, burly guy, staring at the mess. The librarian came rushing over. She took in the scene, the pile of books, Leo, and the other guy. She immediately pointed at the big guy. "What's your major? How could you be so careless?" The guy looked dumbfounded. "Ma'am, it wasn't me. My hand was barely on the shelf when they fell." Leo felt a pang of guilt. The books had fallen toward him. "I'm sorry, ma'am," he said quickly. "It was my fault. I pulled the book out too fast. I'll put them all back." The librarian's expression softened instantly. "Oh, don't worry about it. These things happen. Sometimes the books fall all by themselves." The big guy just stood there, looking utterly betrayed. Still, he came over to help Leo pick up the books. "It wasn't your fault either," he muttered to the librarian. "I saw a huge rat run behind a shelf." "Nonsense," the librarian sniffed. "There's no food in the library. Why would there be rats?" "I saw it too, ma'am," Leo added, putting a book back. "Oh, well, that explains it," she said, her voice full of sympathy for Leo. "You were startled by the rat. It's not your fault at all. We'll have to set some traps tonight." The big guy looked like he was about to have an aneurysm. Leo took an involuntary step back. So this was how the aura of righteousness worked. It wasn't a positive energy buff at all. It was a buff that made the guy standing next to you look like he wanted to commit murder. Leo and the big guy finished reshelving the books. In the end, no punches were thrown. They even exchanged numbers. The guy's name was Aaron Lee. He was a finance major and said he was used to getting blamed for things because of his size. But this was a new one. Usually, there was at least a lack of evidence. To be so blatantly framed was a rare experience. He half joked that maybe his finance classes were making him look less trustworthy. Leo thought, man, you're a good dude. Anyone else would be furious. They parted ways quietly, and Leo went back to browsing. He'd forgotten which book he'd been reaching for, and the thought of the rat's gray fur brushing against the pages was suddenly nauseating. He moved to a different section, Natural Sciences, and pulled out a book titled The Angler's Guide to the Fish Market. The cover was a collage of fish, all laid out on ice, their mouths slightly agape, their black eyes staring blankly. They were fish corpses, really. It was a practical book, organizing market fish by color. White, silver, red, yellow, brown, black, with sections for crustaceans and shellfish. It was a heavy, illustrated volume, featuring species common in the waters around Taiwan. He recognized some of them: beltfish, mackerel, grouper. Others were bizarre, like a ray that looked like an old woman with large nostrils. It was an interesting book, but he had a feeling the people who would find it useful, the home cooks and chefs, would never buy it. They already knew their fish. And the people who would buy it, people like him, rarely set foot in a fish market. It was knowledge for knowledge's sake. And it was a bit morbid if you thought about it. For fish, this book would be a horror show, a catalog of their fallen comrades with nutritional information attached. He skimmed through it. Tilapia, 106 calories, 77 g water, 65 milligrams cholesterol, 3 g fat. The level of detail was impressive. He closed the book, his mind filled with a fresh batch of useless facts. It was a good feeling. He put the book back and saw Aaron Lee a few aisles over, engrossed in a stack of economics textbooks. Leo gave him a wave. Aaron nodded back, his expression grim, and returned to his reading. As Leo left the library, he got a text. Aaron Lee, hey man, thanks for having my back in there. Let me buy you dinner next week. I'm booked this weekend. Dancing stick figure GIF Leo. No worries, you don't have to do that. Sweating emoji. This guy, Leo thought, was a classic case of socially awkward in real life. Makes everyone else socially awkward over text. Moose came bounding toward him as he stepped outside. Simultaneously, the system's voice sounded in his head. The kept man has clearly been hitting the books. A guy's got to have some knowledge about, stuff. Reward. Advanced Culinary Proficiency Level 4. Steamed fish. Permanent. No matter the fish, as long as you steam it, you will achieve an advanced level of culinary skill. Now, this was useful, and it was his first ever advanced level skill. He never thought his first breakthrough into the advanced tiers would be for a single dish. This could be incredibly handy on a fishing trip. He imagined a shark swimming toward him, and with a single touch, a perfectly steamed shark fillet appearing on a platter. His thoughts were interrupted by Moose launching himself at him. The student couple had been boring. The girl wasn't his type, and the guy was an idiot who just kept yelling, "Look here." The treats they offered were mediocre. He was glad his real friend was back. Leo thanked the couple and the security guard, slipping the guard a pack of American spirits. It was a habit he'd picked up lately, keeping a pack of decent cigarettes on him for social lubrication. It wasn't a bribe, just a small gesture of goodwill. The midday sun was warm, the wind had died down, and the air was no longer biting cold. Leo walked Moose back to Paige's apartment at a leisurely pace. He grabbed a late lunch on the student strip, made sure Moose was fed and settled, and then picked up takeout for his own roommates. Back in his familiar spot by the window, on his favorite rug, Moose stretched out his forelegs, his belly full and his body tired from the walk. Leo had taken off his vest before he left. The dog was content. He turned his face to the sun, closed his eyes, and drifted off to sleep.